Welcome. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, make yourself comfortable. This is your time to unwind. If you're enjoying these sleep stories, feel free to give us a like or subscribe, but no pressure at all. Now, let's start our journey. So, it's the year 1347, and you, my friend, are a peasant. Yes, your life is the stuff of those epic tales, but let's cut the romance and dive into the gritty reality. The sun is barely peeking over the horizon, yet your day has already begun. If you're thinking, sleeping in, forget it. No such luxury when the rooster is your alarm clock and it's got no snooze button. Your breakfast? Not exactly a Michelin star affair. Meat pottage, the staple of your diet. It's a watery stew made with whatever grains you can scrape together, and if you're lucky, maybe a rogue carrot or some herbs. Sounds delightful, doesn't it? Don't expect bacon or eggs, that's strictly for the nobility or special occasions. And by special, I mean once in a blue moon. Now, let's talk about your digs. Your humble abode is a one-room thatched roof cottage, and I say one room with the kindest intentions. It's a far cry from a cosy nest. There's no plumbing, no central heating, just a smoky fire pit in the centre, which doubles as your kitchen, heater and light source. Privacy? That's a modern invention. You, your family, and possibly a few chickens share the same space. Each breath of smoky air is a reminder of your station in life. With breakfast over, it's time to get to work. And by work, I mean back-breaking labour from sunrise to sunset. The fields await, and they're not going to plough themselves. Your tools? Primitive at best. A wooden plough pulled by oxen if you're fortunate, otherwise it's all on you. We're talking about a workout regimen the modern gym-goer couldn't handle. Every muscle you've got is put to the test, day in and day out. Earning your keep is a whole different beast. Your wages? A mere 2 pence a day. Let's put that into perspective. It's barely enough to keep your family's heads above the poverty line. Meanwhile, up in the manor, the lord of the land lounges in opulence. His table groans under the weight of meats, cheeses and wines you can't even pronounce. It's a stark contrast, a daily reminder that you're at the bottom rung of the social ladder. Why do you put up with it? Because that's life in medieval Europe. The social contract is simple, yet rigid. You work the land, the Lord protects you, theoretically, and the Church promises you eternal salvation if you keep your nose to the grindstone. It's a system that's been in place for centuries. And stepping out of line isn't an option unless you fancy a stint in the stocks or worse. Now, let's bust a myth or two about the so-called idyllic rural life. You've heard the stories, the pastoral scenes depicted with serene peasants frolicking in lush meadows. Spoiler alert, it's a fairy tale. Disease is rampant, sanitation is a joke, and famine is a constant spectre. The Black Death is just around the corner, and it's about to make life even grimmer. But for today, you toil away, aware but not fully comprehending the storm that's about to hit. Sure, there are festivals and holy days to break the monotony, but they're less about leisure and more about religious observance. The church calendar is your social planner, dictating when you can rest, feast, or fast. And while the occasional ale-soaked revelry offers a glimpse of joy, it's fleeting, a brief respite from the grind. As the morning wears on, you start to feel the weight of the world, or at least the weight of the plough. Your hands are rough, calloused from years of toil. Every furrow you dig is a step closer to survival, yet it's never enough. The serfdom system is designed to keep you tethered to the land, a perpetual cycle of labour and subsistence. And let's not forget the taxes. The Lord demands his share, the church collects its tithe, and you're left with the crumbs. It's a miracle you manage it all. But somehow, you do. Resilience is your middle name. If peasants had middle names, that is. You endure because that's what's expected, and in an age where change is a distant dream, you find solace in the small victories, a healthy harvest, a warm fire, and the enduring hope that tomorrow might be just a tad better. The sun climbs higher, the morning stretching into afternoon. Your muscles ache, your stomach grumbles, but you keep going. It's a life of routine, dictated by the seasons and the whims of those above. Yet, within this cycle, you carve out moments of peace. A shared joke with a fellow labourer, a brief pause to enjoy the sun on your face. These are the moments that make the grind bearable. As you push through the morning, it's clear that life as a 14th century peasant is no fairy tale. It's a hard, unyielding existence, yet one filled with small triumphs and the enduring spirit that keeps you going. So, in this world of mud and sweat, where the line between survival and squalor is razor thin, you find your place. Not in the grand halls of nobility, but in the simple, stubborn persistence that defines your everyday. And with that, another morning fades into the relentless rhythm of life in 1347. As the afternoon sun lazily arches across the sky, the relentless rhythm of your day grinds on. But let's take a breather to discuss something other than the back-breaking labour, the charmingly medieval approach to health and hygiene, or, more accurately, the utter lack thereof. In 1347, the concept of sanitation hadn't quite caught on. Bathing? That's more occasional than your blue moon bacon breakfast. Instead, you rely on layers of grime and the hope that no one gets too close. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, the Black Death. It's like the worst house guest ever, showing up unannounced and leaving chaos in its wake. This bubonic nightmare started its European tour in 1347, and spoiler alert, it's not the kind that sells out stadiums. By the time it wraps up, nearly 60% of Europe's population has checked out permanently. That's right, around 25 million people. Imagine a pandemic so severe that it's like taking the entire population of Australia and poof, they're gone. But back to you, our plucky peasant. You don't know it yet, but the pestilence is creeping closer, like a medieval horror story without the happy ending. Disease is already a constant companion in your life. From dysentery to smallpox, sickness is as common as pottage for breakfast. But the Black Death? It's a whole new level of terror. People can't quite put a finger on what's causing it, so they reach for the nearest explanation, miasma theory. Basically, the idea that bad air is out to get you. And in a world where science is more alchemy than accuracy, it sounds plausible enough. So, enter the bizarre world of medieval preventive measures. Picture this. People setting fires in the streets to purify the air, or carrying bouquets of sweet-smelling herbs like lavender and rosemary to ward off the stench and presumably the disease. If you've ever wondered where the ring a ring o' roses rhyme comes from, there's a grim little nugget for you. This is history's version of clutching your essential oils, hoping they'll save you from the apocalypse. Primary sources from the time paint a picture of sheer panic and chaos. Chroniclers like Giovanni Boccaccio, who penned the Decameron, describe scenes of cities in despair where brother abandons brother and neighbours avoid each other like the, well, plague. It's a world flipped upside down, where fear trumps familial bonds and superstition reigns supreme. Yet, despite the grimness, life goes on. You, our resilient peasant, continue to work the fields, because starvation is a more immediate threat than a mysterious illness from afar. You're blissfully unaware that the rats and fleas you occasionally shoo away are the real culprits in this deadly drama. With no understanding of germs or bacteria, the concept of clean is more about social class than sanitation. Lords might occasionally dip into a bath, but for you, a quick splash of water is as good as it gets. Meanwhile, the Church, which usually has all the answers or claims to struggles to explain the catastrophe, some clergy preach that it's divine punishment for humanity's sins. Others suggest it's the end times, a biblical reckoning. Of course, this doesn't stop them from collecting their tithes. Heaven may be calling, but the Church still needs its earthly dues. As the shadows lengthen and the afternoon stretches into evening, the spectre of the plague hangs over you like a dark cloud. But life, despite its hardships, has a stubborn way of carrying on. The village market still bustles with activity, the chatter of bartering echoing through the air. People gather to exchange news, gossip, and the occasional wild rumour about the disease. It's here that the true weight of the Black Death begins to settle in, a whisper, a warning, a tale from a distant village that suddenly feels all too real. Despite the chaos, there's a grim camaraderie in shared suffering. The bonds of community grow tighter as people come together for solace and support. While fear may drive some apart, others find strength in unity. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, even in the darkest of times. So, as the day winds down and you head back to your smoky, one-room abode, there's a sense of unease mingled with the usual exhaustion. The world is changing, and the storm of the Black Death is on the horizon. Yet, within this maelstrom of disease and despair, you find moments of normalcy, of hope, a shared meal with your family, a quiet moment by the fire, the enduring belief that tomorrow might bring something better. And with that, our medieval tale remains open-ended, the fate of our peasant and their world hanging in the balance. The Black Death is just beginning to make its mark, and the story of 1347 is far from over. So, stay tuned, because history, with all its twists and turns, is about to get even more intriguing. As you trudge back to your quaint, smoke-filled cottage, let's zoom out a bit and take a closer look at your place in this medieval jigsaw puzzle. You're a cog in the feudal machine, a system so perfectly designed to keep you in your place that it would make any modern bureaucrat weep with envy. Feudalism. The medieval version of a multi-level marketing scheme with the king at the top, and you, the lowly peasant, somewhere near the bottom, just above the village livestock. In this hierarchy, your lord owns the land you work, and by own, I mean he controls it like a medieval landlord on a power trip. In return for your labour, you get protection, or at least a promise of it. Because let's be honest, those marauding bandits aren't exactly afraid of a pitchfork-wielding peasant. But hey, it's better than nothing, right? Feudalism, for all its faults, provided a semblance of order in a world where chaos was always lurking around the corner. Now, the obligations you owe to your lord are as numerous as they are tedious. Not only do you work his land, but you also fork over a hefty chunk of your harvest as rent. And let's not forget about the corvée labour, those delightful days where you work directly for the Lord, without a single penny in return. It's like a medieval internship, but with more mud and less hope for advancement. The church, of course, is never far from the action, its influence a constant spectre in your life. The clergy is there to remind you of your place in the cosmic order, with sermons about humility and obedience. And just when you thought your taxes couldn't get any higher, here comes the tithe, a neat 10% cut of your produce straight into the church coffers. It's like having a permanent subscription to a service you never signed up for, with no option to cancel. But amid the drudgery, you do find slices of joy, often in the form of festivals and markets. These events are the medieval equivalent of a long weekend, offering a brief reprieve from the endless grind. Picture the scene, the village square alive with colour and noise, as merchants hawk their wares and minstrels play tunes that, by today's standards, would be considered earworms. You might trade a few eggs for a new pot, or if you're feeling particularly flush, a mug of ale to wash away the taste of pottage. These gatherings are where you see the full tapestry of village life, where everyone knows everyone else's business. It's a double-edged sword, really. On the one hand, there's a comforting sense of community. On the other, there's no hiding your dirty laundry, or worse, your mouldy pottage. Gossip spreads faster than the plague, and the medieval rumour mill is relentless. The festivals are also tied to the church calendar, with celebrations marking everything from the harvest to obscure saints' days. The line between the sacred and the secular is blurry, with feasting and fasting often going hand in hand. The church's grip on your social life is as tight as its hold on your spiritual one. It's the ultimate multitasker, dictating when you can party and when you must repent. But let's debunk the myth of the simple, harmonious peasant life. Sure, these gatherings offer a break from the monotony, but they're not the idyllic scenes often portrayed in art and literature. Beneath the surface there's tension, rivalry, and the ever-present spectre of disease. It's not all maypoles and merriment. The Black Death is the unwelcome guest that no one invited, and its shadow looms large even on festival days. And let's not sugarcoat the feudal system either. While it's easy to romanticize a past where everyone knew their place, the reality is far grimmer. The system is designed to keep you in a perpetual state of dependence, your life's possibilities limited by birthright and circumstance. Social mobility? Forget about it. The odds of you climbing the social ladder are about as high as a snowball's chance in a medieval hell. Your interactions with the Lord and his household are a constant reminder of this disparity. While you toil in the fields, he basks in relative luxury. His meals a cornucopia of meats and delicacies that you can only dream of. Yet, there's a strange sort of symbiosis at play. Without you and your fellow peasants, the Maud's estate would crumble. You're the engine that keeps the manor running, even if you never get to enjoy its spoils. Despite this, there are those rare moments of solidarity and shared purpose. When the harvest is bountiful, the village celebrates together, a collective sigh of relief that the spectre of famine has been kept at bay, at least for another year. It's these moments that remind you of the small triumphs in the peasant's life, the victories that, while minor, are nevertheless significant. As the evening draws to a close, you gather with your family around the fire, a small comfort in a world that often feels overwhelming. The crackling flames offer warmth and light, a brief respite from the darkness outside. Here, in the quiet company of loved ones, you find a semblance of peace. Tomorrow, the cycle begins anew, with its familiar rhythms and routines. So here you are, a peasant in 1347, navigating a world that's equal parts brutal and beautiful. The feudal system may have you in its grip, but within its constraints, you carve out moments of joy, however fleeting. The Black Death may be on the horizon, but today you're living in the moment, finding solace in the small victories that make life in the Middle Ages bearable. Stay tuned, because the story of your life in this tumultuous year is far from over, and history has a few more surprises up its sleeve. As you settle into the familiar warmth of your cottage, let's peel back the layers on the legal and political landscape you're navigating here in 3047. Sure, you've got your daily grind, but there's a whole other world of rules and regulations designed to keep you in check. Think of it as the medieval version of a never-ending game of Simon Says, only the consequences for slipping up are a tad more severe, like stocks, whippings, or worse. In this world, the law is less about justice and more about maintaining order. Petty theft? That can earn you a one-way ticket to the stocks, where the village can pelt you with rotten vegetables or whatever else is handy. And let's not even mention more serious offences. Those can lead to a quick trip to the gallows. Talk about a deterrent. It's a harsh, no-nonsense approach that makes modern legal systems look like a gentle slap on the wrist. The rights of peasants are about as limited as the food at your breakfast table. Sure, you're not a slave in the strictest sense, but your freedom is more theoretical than practical. The Lord owns the land, and by extension, a significant chunk of your life. You can't just pack up and start a new life elsewhere. That would require permission, and good luck getting that. You're bound to the land, and the land in turn is bound to the Lord. Enter the Statute of Labourers in 1351, a piece of legislation that really puts the medieval in medieval market control. The Black Death has swept through, claiming lives and creating a severe labour shortage. Imagine your workforce suddenly shrinking by up to 60%. It's like the ultimate sick day that never ends. So, what do the powers that be do? They panic and try to freeze wages at pre-plague levels, because heaven forbid the peasantry get uppity with their newfound bargaining power. The Statute of Labourers is essentially a big no to any peasant hoping to leverage the sudden demand for workers into better pay or conditions. It dictates that wages remain at 3046 standards, and anyone caught paying or accepting more faces fines or imprisonment. It's the medieval equivalent of a corporate crackdown, complete with all the unfairness and frustration you can imagine. Of course, this doesn't go over well with the peasants, who see their one chance at improving their lot in life snatched away. It's like being handed a golden ticket, only to have it confiscated at the factory gates. The statute is a desperate attempt to keep the status quo intact, but it only stirs discontent. Peasants are tired of being the medieval world's doormat, and this frustration simmers, just waiting to boil over. Fast forward to 1381, and that simmering discontent erupts into the peasants' revolt. Picture this, a cross-country wave of rebellion as peasants and labourers rise up against the oppressive system. It's a grassroots movement fueled by anger and a desire for change, the medieval version of "we're not going to take it anymore." The rebels demand the abolition of serfdom and labour dues, and a reduction in taxes. Essentially a medieval manifesto for workers' rights. The rebellion is chaotic and passionate, a firestorm of unrest that spreads from Essex to Kent, capturing the imagination and hearts of thousands. The rebels march on London, a ragtag army of the disgruntled and determined, demanding an audience with King Richard II. It's a showdown between the rulers and the ruled, a dramatic moment that feels like the climax of a particularly intense medieval drama. The peasants' revolt is ultimately quashed, but its legacy is profound. It rocks the establishment to its core, sending a clear message that the status quo isn't as unshakable as it seems. The fear it instills in the ruling class is a victory in itself, proving that even the most entrenched systems can be challenged. It's a testament to the power of collective action, a reminder that when the peasantry bands together, the world takes notice. Back in 1347, as you sit by your fire, these rumblings of discontent are still in their infancy. But the seeds are there, planted by the harsh realities of your daily life and nurtured by the injustices you face. You might not be able to foresee the peasants' revolt, but you feel the undercurrent of change, a subtle shift in the winds of history. In this world of rigid hierarchies and unyielding laws, you find your own ways to resist. Maybe it's an extra handful of grain tucked away for your family, or a whispered conversation with others who share your frustrations. These small acts of defiance are your way of pushing back against a system that seems impossible to overcome. So, as the evening deepens and the world outside your cottage is cloaked in darkness, you hold on to these moments of quiet rebellion. They're the sparks that keep the fires of hope burning, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The story of your life in 1347 is far from over, and history has a way of surprising even the most downtrodden. As the medieval night stretches on, you find solace in the knowledge that change is possible, even in a world as unyielding as this one. Stay tuned, because the saga of the 14th century peasant is just getting started, and there's plenty more to uncover in this tumultuous chapter of history. As the medieval night envelops you in its inky embrace, let's chew over the notion of resilience, not the kind peddled by self-help gurus, but the gritty, mud-under-the-fingernails type that defines your life in 1347. This resilience isn't just a quaint side note in the grand tapestry of history. It's the backbone of survival in a world that seems to have signed an exclusive contract with disaster. Plagues, famines, and feudal lords with egos rivaling their estates, it's all part of the daily grind. The Black Death, that unwelcome visitor to the medieval party, inadvertently becomes a catalyst for change, like a pyromaniac accidentally discovering fire safety. As it slashes through the population, the labour shortage it creates isn't just a problem, it's a tectonic shift. Suddenly, the peasants, those humble cogs in the feudal machine, find themselves in possession of a rare commodity: bargaining power. Picture this. Wage demands start to resemble negotiations rather than submissions. The lords, desperate to keep their lands productive, find themselves reluctantly upping the ante. This labour shortage even nudges the rigid feudal system toward a slow-motion implosion. With fewer workers to till the fields, the demand for labour pushes up wages, like an economic seesaw finally tipping in favour of the peasants. The once ironclad structure of serfdom starts to rust at the edges, challenging the status quo more effectively than any peasant revolt could. The irony? It's the same system that sought to keep peasants in perpetual servitude that inadvertently becomes the architect of its own unravelling. Let's sprinkle in some hard numbers to ground this tale. Before the Black Death, serfs might earn a measly 2 pence a day, barely enough to keep the pottage pot simmering. Post-plague, however, surviving peasants could command up to 4 or 5 pence for the same back-breaking work. It's not exactly hitting the jackpot, but in medieval terms, it's like finding a golden egg in your henhouse. These small gains sow the seeds of a more profound transformation, one that will ripple through the coming centuries. As the evening deepens, it's worth reflecting on the myths that have clung to peasant life like barnacles on a ship's hull. The idyllic pastoral scenes with contented labourers and bountiful harvests are about as realistic as finding a dragon in your backyard. The reality is a relentless cycle of toil, with the spectre of disease and hunger always lurking in the shadows. But within this harsh existence, there are moments of genuine camaraderie and community, a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of the human spirit. Take, for instance, the enduring myth of the noble peasant, content and simple. This romanticized image glosses over the complexities of their lives, where every decision is a delicate balance between survival and submission. The truth is far messier, a tapestry of small victories and larger struggles, where each day is a testament to endurance rather than contentment. The contributions of these oft-overlooked figures are significant, even if medieval chroniclers were more interested in kings and battles than in the daily heroics of the common folk. It's the peasants who maintain the food supply, who keep the manorial system from collapsing under its own weight. Their resilience, often taken for granted, is the quiet force that underpins medieval society, a constant in a world defined by chaos and change. As the fire in your cottage flickers and fades, casting long shadows on the walls, it's clear that the story of 3047 is one of both hardship and hope. The Black Death may have loosened the feudal system's grip, but it's the resilience of the peasantry that truly sets the stage for future social change. This is more than just a tale of survival. It's a story of transformation, of how adversity can become the unlikely midwife to progress. In the grand scheme of history, the peasants, though often relegated to the footnotes, play a critical role. They are the unsung architects of change, their lives a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. So, as you drift into the embrace of sleep, remember that the legacy of these medieval labourers is woven into the very fabric of our modern world. And there you have it, my friend, a day in the life of a 14th century peasant, complete with all the grit and glory that history has to offer. The story of 1347 doesn't end here. It's a continuum, a series of events that ripple through time, shaping the world in ways both seen and unseen. As you close your eyes, let the lessons of resilience and change settle in, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the seeds of transformation are sown. So sleep well, for the saga of history is vast, and tomorrow brings new tales to uncover. In the grand tapestry of human history, where everyone's trying to find meaning in the chaos, the ancient Chinese took a rather creative approach to figuring out their place in the universe. They turned to the stars and animals, not just for entertainment, but as a roadmap for life. Yes, we're diving into the world of ancient Chinese astrology, where celestial bodies and a parade of 12 animals told you everything from who you should marry to whether Tuesday was a good day to start a revolution. Now, let's start with the basics. This wasn't just some hobby for the ancients. Astrology was a full-blown cultural phenomenon that seeped into every nook and cranny of daily life. The roots of this practice dig deep into the soil of the Zhou dynasty, which began around 1046 BCE, though its popularity really took off during the Han dynasty around 26 BCE to 220 CE. Back then, if you wanted to know your fortune or understand your personality, you didn't just swipe left or right on an app. Nope, you checked the stars, or more precisely, the positions of Jupiter and the lunar calendar. These two celestial markers work together to create a 12-year cycle, with each year assigned to an animal in what we now call the Chinese Zodiac. And let's talk about those animals. Picture this, a curious mix of creatures ranging from the mighty dragon to the humble rat. There's a story, almost like a mythological reality TV show, about how these animals came to be the representatives of the Zodiac. According to legend, the Jade Emperor needed 12 animals for his calendar and sent out an invite to all creatures for a great race. The order in which they finished would determine their place in the Zodiac. Spoiler alert, the rat, ever the crafty little critter, hitchhiked on the back of the kind-hearted ox and leapt to the finish line first. This little rodent began the cycle, followed by the ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster, dog, and pig. If you think that sounds like a personality test gone viral, you're spot on. Each animal came with its own set of characteristics, much like a BuzzFeed quiz that tells you which type of bread you are based on your morning routine. The rat was seen as clever and quick-witted, while the ox was diligent and dependable. The dragon, with its mystical aura, symbolized power and good fortune. And yes, people took this seriously, so seriously that it influenced everything from personal relationships to career choices. Imagine deciding to marry someone because they were born in a compatible year, according to the Zodiac. If your sign was a rabbit, you might be advised to marry a pig rather than a rooster, because apparently pigs and rabbits make a better match. And hey, if your career counselor suggested you become a farmer because you were born in the year of the ox, who were you to argue with centuries of tradition backed by celestial approval? But it wasn't just about personal lives. The influence of astrology stretched all the way to the top of the social ladder. Chinese emperors employed astrologers who were, quite literally, stargazers tasked with interpreting heavenly signs. These astrologers wielded considerable power, as their predictions could affect political decisions, military campaigns, and even the emperor's actions. If the stars said it was a bad time to go to war, the emperor might just hold off on that whole conquering the neighbouring kingdom thing. Of course, while the Zodiac offered a sense of order and predictability in an otherwise chaotic world, it also had its fair share of skeptics. There were always those who questioned why their fate should be tied to a celestial rodent or a mythical dragon. After all, letting a rooster dictate your career path might seem a bit, well, flighty. Yet, the romantic appeal of this system was undeniable. It offered a cosmic connection to the universe and a sense of belonging to something greater than oneself. And who doesn't love a good story about animals racing for a spot in history? As we continue to unravel the threads of this ancient practice, remember that the allure of astrology lies not just in its predictions, but in its ability to weave together the fabric of society. The Chinese Zodiac wasn't just a way to pass the time or entertain at parties. It was a profound system that shaped cultures, influenced decisions, and connected people to the cosmos in a way that still resonates today. So, as you glance at the stars tonight, think about how, centuries ago, someone might have been doing the same, wondering if the year of the dragon would finally bring them that long-awaited promotion. And speaking of pondering the stars, let's talk about how those twinkling lights in the sky weren't just for romance or poetic musings in ancient China. Nope, they were the ultimate decision-making tool, especially when it came to the blood-and-guts business of running an empire. Picture a time when emperors, the big shots of their day, had a lot riding on what the stars had to say. Everything from their claim to the throne to the fate of their crops depended on celestial approval. In the high-stakes world of ancient Chinese politics, astrology wasn't just a quirky sidebar, it was central to the game plan. Emperors leaned on astrologers like modern CEOs rely on financial analysts, except these astrologers didn't just predict market trends, they interpreted the cosmos. The belief was that the emperor, or the son of heaven, had a divine mandate to rule, which could conveniently be confirmed by the stars. This cosmic stamp of approval was known as the mandate of heaven. If the celestial patterns were favorable, it was like getting the heavenly thumbs up to keep your crown snugly on your head. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Just like today's stock market predictions, astrology was an inexact science, and sometimes the stars didn't play nice. An eclipse, for instance, could signal bad times ahead. In 236 BCE, one of the earliest recorded eclipses sent panic through the Xia dynasty. Legend has it that two royal astronomers, Shi and Ho, failed to predict it and paid with their lives, a harsh lesson in the perils of celestial miscalculation. Fast forward to the Han dynasty, where things got even more intense. Emperors like Wu of Han weren't just passive consumers of astrological advice, they were actively using it to solidify their power. Emperor Wu, reigning from 141 to 87 BCE, was a big fan of the stars. He used astrology to legitimize his military campaigns, claiming divine favor for his conquests. In a world where military might and agricultural success were key to an empire's stability, having the stars on your side was like having a cosmic insurance policy. And let's talk about agriculture for a minute. Picture ancient China, a sprawling empire heavily reliant on farming, where a bad harvest could spell disaster. Astrologers played a critical role in determining the best times for planting and harvesting. They would analyze the positions of planets and stars, much like agricultural meteorologists, to advise on the timing of these crucial activities. In effect, they were betting the farm, literally, on their interpretations of the sky. But here's where things get deliciously complicated. Just as some modern investors might get a little too cozy with their financial advisors, some emperors got a bit too friendly with their astrologers. These celestial consultants wielded significant influence, and their proximity to power often led to intrigue and manipulation. It was a delicate dance, maintaining the emperor's favor while ensuring their predictions kept the empire afloat. Now, let's draw a modern parallel here. Think of today's stock market gurus, the ones with the uncanny ability to predict economic shifts and trends. Their words can send markets soaring or plummeting. In ancient China, an astrologer's prediction could have a similar effect, not on stock prices, but on the very stability of the empire itself. Imagine the pressure. One wrong call, and you could be responsible for a famine or a failed military campaign. It was celestial roulette with very real-world consequences. And just like today, not everyone bought into the hype. There were skeptics who questioned why their fate should be tied to celestial phenomena. But even the naysayers couldn't deny the power of astrology as a tool for political propaganda. The romantic allure of being in sync with the universe was irresistible, and it offered a convenient narrative for rulers to justify their actions. If the stars were favorable, it was because the emperor was righteous. If they weren't, it was a cosmic call for reform or a change in leadership. While astrology offered a cosmic framework for governance, it also underscored the fragility of power. Emperors who ruled with the mandate of heaven were always one bad omen away from rebellion. If the stars indicated dissatisfaction, it could embolden rivals or spark uprisings. In this way, astrology was both a stabilizing force and a potential catalyst for chaos, a double-edged sword in the emperor's arsenal. As we peel back the layers of this ancient practice, it's clear that astrology was more than just stargazing. It was a sophisticated system of power dynamics, economic planning, and social control. It was a way to make sense of the unpredictable, to impose order on chaos, and to connect the earthly realm with the divine. So the next time you check your horoscope or see a stock market analyst making bold predictions, remember that we've been looking to the stars for guidance, and sometimes justification for millennia. And while the methods may have evolved, the human desire to find patterns in the chaos remains as strong as ever. Stay tuned, because we're just getting started on this cosmic journey. There's more to uncover about how astrology shaped and was shaped by the tumultuous tides of history. The stars have a lot more to say, and we're here to decode their ancient whispers, one constellation at a time. Let's march forward through the cosmos, where the ancient Chinese didn't just stop at animals and celestial soap operas. No, they brought out the big guns, mathematical calculations, astronomical instruments, and philosophical frameworks that would make even the most ardent horoscope skeptic pause. We're about to dive into the technical guts of ancient astrology, where the magic was less about pixie dust and more about angles, measures, and a sprinkle of educated guesswork. First up, the 5 elements. No, not a sequel to a Bruce Willis movie, but an essential component of Chinese metaphysics. Wood, fire, earth, metal, and water form this quintet, each element interacting with and influencing the others in a never-ending cosmic dance. This wasn't just philosophical musing, it was a way to explain natural phenomena and human behavior. Picture it as the ancient Chinese version of rock, paper, scissors, but with universal forces. Each element was associated with specific traits, seasons, directions, and even body organs, making them as much a diagnostic tool as a guide to the stars. Now, if you're wondering how these elements fit into astrology, buckle up. The 5 elements combined with the 12-year Zodiac cycle to create a 60-year cycle, which was like the ultimate cosmic Rubik's Cube. This complex system could tell you not only if you were a fiery dragon or a watery rat, but also whether the year itself was going to be, say, a wood dragon year or a metal rat year. Picture the astrologers of the time as ancient data analysts, trying to unravel the mysteries of the universe with a cosmic spreadsheet. The 5 elements added layers to the Zodiac, making it part science, part art, and all-encompassing mystery. Speaking of mystery, let's talk yin and yang, the dynamic duo of Chinese cosmology. If you've ever seen the iconic black and white swirl, you know these two forces represent balance. Yin is the passive, dark, and feminine side, while yang is active, light, and masculine. Together, they form the backbone of Chinese thought, from medicine to martial arts to, you guessed it, astrology. The interplay between yin and yang reflected the duality in everything, including human destinies charted by the stars. This wasn't just a philosophical concept, it was a practical tool for astrologers, helping them interpret the heavens and ground their readings in a cosmic tug-of-war between opposing forces. But let's be real for a moment. However sophisticated these models were, they weren't exactly foolproof. The astrologers had to rely on a mix of solid math, intuition, and a bit of showmanship. Imagine a time when the stars were your PowerPoint slides, and you had to sell your interpretations to emperors who weren't always thrilled with bad news. The margin for error? Let's just say it was the size of the Great Wall. Now, for the tech geeks out there, let's delve into the gadgets that the ancients used to map the stars. Chief among these was the armillary sphere, a device that looks like a steampunk artist's fever dream, made of bronze rings representing celestial circles. This instrument was used to model the heavens. It was both a tool for observation and an educational device, akin to having a planetarium in your backyard. The armillary sphere was a marvel of its time, though not without its quirks. Think of it as the ancient world's version of a telescope app, useful but occasionally buggy. Just as today's apps might crash, an armillary sphere could give you a skewed reading if not aligned just right. These instruments required meticulous care and a good deal of skill to operate. They were the pride of the imperial courts where astronomers would gather to ponder the mysteries of the universe. But remember, these were not just scholarly pursuits. The stakes were high. A miscalculation could spell political disaster or economic ruin. Imagine the pressure on these ancient astronomers, knowing that their celestial forecasts could decide whether the emperor went to war or stayed home for a nice cup of tea. But let's debunk a myth here. While these instruments and methods were advanced for their time, they were by no means infallible. The notion of precise astronomical prediction was more wishful thinking than reality. The ancients did their best with what they had. But much like a weather forecast, there was a fair bit of educated guessing involved. The margin for error was broad, and yet the allure of the stars was such that people were willing to overlook the occasional misstep. After all, when you're dealing with the cosmos, a little mystery only adds to the romance. The reality, however, was that these predictions were often used as tools of control. An emperor could claim the stars were aligned with his ambitions, using the weight of celestial approval to bolster his authority. If the stars predicted a good harvest, it was seen as divine endorsement of the emperor's rule. If they didn't, well, there was always room for interpretation or an astrologer to blame. And yet, despite these limitations, the ancient Chinese achievements in astrology were nothing short of remarkable. They laid the groundwork for future generations to explore the heavens with ever-improving technology. Their understanding of the universe, while not perfect, was a testament to human curiosity and the relentless search for meaning in the vastness of space. So, as you ponder the stars tonight, consider the legacy of these ancient stargazers. They were pioneers, blending science, art and philosophy in a cosmic tapestry that continues to fascinate us. And while the tools and methods have evolved, the human desire to find order in chaos remains unchanged. We've come a long way since the days of our armillary spheres and 5 elements, but the stars still hold secrets waiting to be unraveled. Stay tuned, because there's more to uncover in this celestial saga. We've only scratched the surface of astrology's influence on history, and the stars have more tales to tell. As we continue this cosmic journey, remember that the heavens are not just a backdrop to our lives, but an integral part of the human story, one that's been written in the stars for millennia. As we venture deeper into this celestial rabbit hole, let's peel back the layers on how ancient Chinese astrology was more than just a cosmic weather forecast. It was the OG life management system. Think of it as your ancient Siri. But instead of reminding you to pick up dry cleaning, it advised on everything from who to marry to when to plant your rice. And, spoiler alert, these decisions weren't always based on solid reasoning, but rather on a cosmic blend of superstition, tradition, and a dash of wishful thinking. Let's start with marriage because, believe it or not, love wasn't just about chemistry or swiping right on a stone tablet. Nope, it was about aligning your stars, and by stars, we mean your birth animals. The Chinese Zodiac wasn't just a cute theme for your wedding invites, it was a serious matchmaking tool. Families would consult astrologers to determine compatibility, often consulting the Zodiac to decide whether a dragon should tie the knot with a monkey or a pig. Yes, according to these celestial matchmakers, your love life was essentially a cosmic puzzle, with each animal sign fitting perfectly, or disastrously, with another. And speaking of disasters, let's not forget the pressure this put on the betrothed. Imagine trying to convince your parents that your beloved rooster was the right match, despite what Heavenly Rabbit might have to say about it. In a society where family and tradition held sway, going against astrological advice was akin to tempting fate. It was akin to showing up to a black tie event in your pajamas, daring but not without consequences. But astrology's tentacles reached far beyond the realm of romance. It was also a health advisor doling out advice that ranged from sensible to downright bizarre. Ancient Chinese medicine often intertwined with astrological beliefs, suggesting, for example, that those born in the year of the water snake might have issues with their kidneys, given the element's association with that organ. It was a blend of holistic medicine and cosmic diagnosis, where your treatment plan could involve both herbal remedies and an admonition to avoid certain activities on inauspicious days. If you think modern wellness apps are a bit much, imagine consulting the stars to decide whether to go for a jog or stay in bed. There was even advice on when to schedule surgeries based on the alignment of celestial bodies. While some of these recommendations had a kernel of truth, like aligning medical procedures with body rhythms, others were more about appeasing the cosmic forces. This wasn't exactly evidence-based medicine, but who were you to argue with the heavens? And now, for the pièce de résistance, architecture. Yes, the stars even dictated how buildings were designed and constructed. Feng Shui, the ancient Chinese practice of harmonizing individuals with their environment, was deeply rooted in astrology. The positioning of a home or palace wasn't just about aesthetics or practicality, but about aligning with the stars and the flow of energy, or qi. Picture it as cosmic interior design, where the placement of doors and windows could determine the prosperity and luck of the inhabitants. In fact, Feng Shui masters were often consulted to ensure that structures were in harmony with the cosmos. They would use compass readings and astrological charts to guide construction, ensuring that homes weren't just built on solid ground, but on solid celestial principles. So, if your ancient Chinese house had bad vibes, it wasn't just a decorating faux pas, it was a cosmic crisis. But let's not get carried away with the romance of it all. While astrology offered a comforting narrative, a way to feel connected to the vast universe, it was also a tool of social conformity. The pressure to adhere to astrological advice was very real, with societal expectations weaving astrology into the fabric of daily life. In a culture where harmony and order were prized, the stars provided a framework that reinforced social norms and hierarchies. Take the concept of Tianming, or the mandate of heaven, which weaves through both political and personal spheres. This belief held that one's fate was predetermined by the heavens, and to go against it was to invite chaos. It was a convenient way for those in power to maintain the status quo, as well as a comforting or stifling belief for the individual. After all, if your fate was written in the stars, there was little room for revolt. Yet, for all its weighty influence, astrology was not immune to skepticism. Even in ancient times, there were those who questioned the wisdom of letting celestial animals dictate their lives. But the romantic appeal of being part of a grand cosmic narrative was hard to resist. It offered a sense of connection and meaning in a world that, much like today, often seemed chaotic and unpredictable. Fast forward to the modern era, and you'll find that the allure of astrology hasn't exactly fizzled out. It's just had a digital makeover. Today, astrology apps are the new stargazers, offering daily horoscopes and compatibility readings right at your fingertips. The same pressures and societal norms that once dictated life choices now come packaged in sleek, user-friendly interfaces. The ancient practice has adapted to modern times, but at its core, it still serves the same purpose, providing a framework to navigate life's uncertainties. So, whether you're consulting your astrological chart to pick a wedding date or deciding whether to buy that new couch, know that you're part of a long tradition of celestial consultation. While the methods have evolved, the human desire to find patterns in the chaos remains as strong as ever. And isn't that the real magic of astrology? It's less about predicting the future and more about understanding our place in the universe, one starry-eyed interpretation at a time. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel this celestial saga, exploring how these ancient practices still resonate today. The stars may be distant, but their impact on our lives remains undeniably close. Fast forward to the 21st century, and you'll find that the ancient Chinese penchant for peering into the cosmos is still alive and kicking, albeit with a modern twist. The allure of astrology has not just endured, it has evolved, infiltrating everything from pop culture to economic decisions. It's as if the Zodiac has ditched its traditional robes for a sleek new app interface, yet still whispers the same timeless secrets. Let's start with a cultural staple that's practically synonymous with Chinese astrology, the Chinese New Year. This annual celebration, marked by vibrant festivals and the exchange of red envelopes filled with money, is a testament to the Zodiac's staying power. Each year brings a new animal sign, setting the tone for the months ahead. In 2023, for example, we ushered in the Year of the Water Rabbit, a time said to be characterized by peacefulness and introspection. This isn't just a quaint tradition, it's a multi-billion-dollar event that influences everything from travel to retail sales. And let's not forget the global fascination with horoscopes. Flip through any lifestyle magazine or scroll through your social media feeds, and you'll likely stumble upon predictions that promise to reveal your romantic prospects or career trajectory based on your birth year. It's a testament to our enduring love affair with the stars, even if the advice sometimes feels like it could apply to anyone with a pulse. But why does astrology continue to captivate us? Perhaps it's because, in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, astrology offers a narrative, a cosmic storyline where each of us plays a starring role. It's a comforting thought that somewhere in the vastness of space there's a roadmap just for you. And while skeptics may dismiss it as pseudoscience, the sheer number of believers suggests there's more to it than mere superstition. Astrology's modern appeal isn't limited to personal growth, it has economic implications too. Consider the feng shui effect on real estate. In cities like Hong Kong, properties with favourable feng shui can command a premium of up to 20%. Buyers aren't just purchasing a home, they're investing in good fortune. It's an economic gamble that speaks volumes about the power of belief. And who can blame them? In a market as volatile as real estate, a little cosmic assurance is worth its weight in gold, or at least in square footage. Yet, for all its modern-day applications, astrology remains a balancing act between skepticism and cultural appreciation. The scientific community largely regards it as a relic of the past, an ancient practice that lacks empirical evidence. But its cultural significance is undeniable, especially in China, where the Zodiac is woven into the very fabric of society. It informs not just New Year celebrations but also personal decisions, from naming children to selecting auspicious dates for weddings. This brings us to an essential point. The human desire to find meaning in the stars is a universal trait, transcending borders and cultures. Whether you're a CEO consulting an astrologer before a big merger, or a teenager reading your daily horoscope, the quest for cosmic validation is a shared experience. It's a reminder that, despite our differences, we're all looking for the same thing, a sense of belonging in an increasingly disconnected world. And let's not overlook the darker side of astrology's appeal. In times of uncertainty, people often turn to the stars for guidance, seeking order in chaos. This can be both comforting and dangerous, particularly when astrological advice influences critical decisions. The risk is that we become too reliant on the stars, using them as a crutch rather than a compass. As with any belief system, the challenge lies in finding a healthy balance between faith and reason. So, what does the future hold for astrology? If history's any indication, it will continue to evolve, adapting to the needs of each generation. As technology advances, so too will our methods of interpreting the stars. Perhaps one day we'll have AI astrologers capable of providing hyper-personalized predictions. Or maybe the next great innovation will come from a fusion of astrology and neuroscience, offering insights into the cosmic underpinnings of our neural pathways. In the end, astrology's lasting impact is not just about predicting the future, but about understanding our place in the universe. It's a poetic reminder that, despite our technological advancements, we remain intrinsically connected to the cosmos. And while the stars may not dictate our destinies, they offer a perspective that is as humbling as it is hopeful. As we wrap up this celestial journey, let's take a moment to appreciate the timeless nature of astrology. It has survived empires, revolutions, and countless scientific discoveries, yet still captivates our imaginations. In a world where change is the only constant, the stars offer a reassuring sense of continuity. They remind us that, no matter how chaotic life may seem, we're all part of a grand cosmic narrative. So, the next time you glance up at the night sky, remember that you're not just looking at distant suns and planets. You're gazing at a tapestry woven with the dreams, hopes and fears of countless generations, and while the stars may not have all the answers, they invite us to ponder the questions, to seek meaning in the vastness of space, and to find our own place in the universe. As we conclude this exploration of ancient Chinese astrology, let's leave with a parting thought. The stars are not just celestial bodies, but beacons of wonder and curiosity. They're a reminder that, even in our most uncertain moments, there's beauty in the mystery and wisdom in the quest for understanding. So, let's keep looking up, for the heavens have much to teach us, and the journey is only just beginning. Your eyes flutter open to find yourself lying on a wooden bench in a longhouse that's about as inviting as a medieval icebox. Welcome to 11th century Iceland, where the concept of central heating is about as familiar as a smartphone. The air is crisp, And by crisp, I mean it's practically slicing through your skin like a Viking sword through a herring. You're in a longhouse, the original open-plan living space. Drafty and dimly lit, it's less luxury condo and more rustic barn. The first thing you notice is the smell. It's a heady cocktail of wood smoke, animal musk, and unwashed human. But hey, there's a reason they call it living history. The longhouse is a single-room dwelling, roughly 15 to 20 meters long, with a roof thatched from whatever the Icelandic landscape grudgingly offers. The walls are made of turf and stone, which do a stellar job of keeping out the warmth, but at least they're great at letting in the cold. As you sit up, you realize you're not alone. You've got roommates of the hooved variety. Yes, here, in this Viking Airbnb, you're sharing your digs with a few sheep and maybe a cow. This wasn't some animal lover's quirky lifestyle choice. Livestock were practically heating units on 4 legs, contributing body heat to the family abode. Think of them as the original space heaters, minus the on-off switch. Now, before you go romanticizing your new Viking lifestyle, let's crush a popular myth. Vikings weren't all about pillaging monasteries and sporting horned helmets. Seriously, those horns were a Victorian-era costume designer's fantasy. Many Vikings, especially in Iceland, were just trying to make a living. Today you're stepping into the sturdy shoes of a fisherman, which, let's be honest, have probably seen better days. The Viking fisherman's day begins before the sun even thinks of showing up. With the North Atlantic as your grocery store, you've got to be an early bird or fish in order to catch the proverbial worm. And by worm, I mean cod. Cod is the gold standard here, not just a fish, but a currency that oils the wheels of Viking commerce. You've got to haul in enough to feed your family, trade with your neighbors, and maybe, just maybe, have a little left over to salt and store for those days when the sea's generosity dries up. You bundle up in woolen garments, which are surprisingly effective at warding off the chill when layered. Vikings were nothing if not masters of the art of layering. Your cloak, spun from the wool of the very sheep sleeping a few feet away, is your barrier against the cold winds that whip across the Icelandic landscape. It's no designer parka, but it does the trick. Your gear is a far cry from the high-tech fishing rods and nets we have today. You're working with a simple line and hook crafted from bone or iron if you're lucky. The boat, a clinker-built wooden vessel, small enough for a couple of you to handle, but sturdy enough to withstand the North Atlantic's temper tantrums. The ocean isn't just a source of food, it's a lifeline. Iceland's terrain is about as forgiving as a Viking chieftain with a grudge. Arable land is scarce, and the growing season is laughably short. You can't exactly rely on farming to fill your pantry, so fishing is your best bet to avoid an embarrassingly empty dinner table. Out at sea, you're not just battling the fish, you're up against the elements too. The North Atlantic is known for its mood swings, and today it's feeling particularly moody. The waves are high and the wind is relentless, but you've got no choice but to press on. Every fisherman knows the sea giveth and the sea taketh away, and today you're hoping it's feeling generous. As the morning wears on, you're still focused on your task, casting your line and hoping for a bite. There's a certain rhythm to it, a meditative quality to the repetitive motion. It's easy to see why the romantic image of the Viking warrior has overshadowed the fisherman's reality. The latter's life is about patience and persistence rather than glory and conquest. But don't get too comfortable. The ocean is unpredictable, and you've got to keep your wits about you. A sudden squall could turn an ordinary fishing trip into a fight for survival. The boat rocks beneath you, and you grip the sides, silently cursing the weather gods. But this is the life you've chosen, or, more accurately, the life that's chosen you. In 11th century Iceland, you don't exactly have a LinkedIn profile listing your career aspirations. As you haul in your catch of the day, an assortment of cod, haddock, and maybe a cheeky little herring, you can't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. It's not about the adrenaline rush of a battle, but the quiet satisfaction of providing for your family, of knowing that tonight, at least, there will be food on the table. And so, with your bounty secured, you steer your little vessel back towards the shore, the salty wind at your back, and the promise of a meal ahead. The day is far from over, but you've survived the morning, which is no small feat in this harsh, unforgiving land. As you make your way back to the longhouse, you've got a new appreciation for the Viking fisherman's life, unglamorous, yes, but essential. And in a world that often forgets the small stories, that's something worth remembering. And as you haul your catch back to shore, let's take a moment to unpack the real nuts and bolts, or, wooden pegs and bone hooks of Viking fishing gear. Forget your notions of Vikings as mere axe-wielding marauders. These folks were the original multitaskers, blending seafaring with subsistence living. Their fishing technology might seem primitive to us, but it was about as sophisticated as it got in the 11th century. Let's talk about the real treasure trove on a Viking boat. Not gold, but the nets and oars. First, those nets. Made from plant fibers like flax or even animal sinews, these nets were woven with the kind of care usually reserved for a first date. They weren't cheap either, demanding hours of labor. In today's terms, think of them as the Viking equivalent of a high-end laptop, essential, expensive, and absolutely necessary for getting the job done. A well-maintained net could be the difference between a bountiful catch and a disappointing fish-free dinner. And just like with modern tech, you'd better pray nothing snags, tears, or otherwise malfunctions. Now, let's not forget the oars. Far from being just a stick with a paddle at the end, these were crafted from sturdy wood like oak or ash. A single oar could take days to carve and shape, and it needed to withstand both the battering of the ocean and the occasional oops moment when it met a rock or another boat. Oars were a communal investment, not unlike buying stock in a small tech startup. Everyone had a stake in the success of the voyage. Once you're back on terra firma, it's time to face the music of Viking economics. A sardonic twist of fate has cod playing the starring role, not just as sustenance, but as currency. You see, Iceland wasn't exactly rolling in farmland. Its volcanic soil is about as fertile as a rock concert mosh pit. So, fish became a trading currency, the Bitcoin of the Viking Age, if you will. Cod and herring were salted and dried, turning them into long-lasting commodities that could be swapped for grains, wool, and other necessities. Speaking of necessities, let's dive into the Viking diet, which was as flavorful as a beige wall. Sure, cod and herring were staples, but they were often complemented by dairy products, barley, and the occasional livestock sacrifice. Vegetables? Sparse, thanks to the short growing season. Instead, you might find yourself longing for a juicy carrot while gnawing on yet another piece of dried fish. The social ladder in Viking society was about as easy to climb as a greased pole in a rainstorm. Fishermen found themselves somewhere in the middle above the thralls, who were essentially the bottom rung as slaves or serfs, but below the warriors and chieftains whose exploits made the sagas. Being a fisherman wasn't glamorous, but it was a respected trade. After all, someone had to catch the fish that fed the warriors who brought back the spoils of war. Don't be fooled by the romanticism of the warrior class. Their lives were frequently brutal and short-lived. Fishermen, on the other hand, had the dubious honor of facing the daily grind of the ocean's whims. While they might not have had the glory of battle, they had the stability of regular meals and a modicum of respect within the community. A fisherman's life may not have been filled with tales of conquest, but it was a steady one, crucial to the fabric of Viking society. Now, before you start thinking that Viking society was all rugged individualism, let's talk about the surprisingly sophisticated trading networks that these fish supported. Icelandic fishermen were part of a web that stretched from Scandinavia to the British Isles and beyond. They traded with other Norse communities, swapping fish for essentials like timber and grain. The reach of these networks shows that while Vikings might have been isolated by geography, they were anything but isolated economically. And so, as the sun casts its last golden rays over the Icelandic landscape, you return to the longhouse, your haul in tow. It's a life that demands respect for the sea's bounty and a keen understanding of the community's needs. The Viking fisherman's role was one of resilience and resourcefulness, a pivotal part of a society often overshadowed by the warrior's sword and the poet's pen. As you step back into that draughty longhouse, remember that the tales of warriors might fill the pages of history, but it's the fishermen who filled the bellies and, quite literally, fueled the tales themselves. As you step back into that draughty longhouse, remember that while warriors might fill history books, it's the fishermen who filled the bellies and, quite literally, fueled the tales themselves. Now, let's talk about lunch. Or, as it's known in 11th century Iceland, whatever's edible and can be eaten while standing up. You've got dried fish, a staple that's as close to a Viking energy bar as you're going to get. Forget about spices. Your taste buds are taking a minimalist approach to seasoning today. This isn't quite Michelin star dining unless Michelin starts rating on the survival to starvation scale. While you chew on your fish jerky, let's explore the communal aspects of Viking society. For starters, this longhouse isn't just your crash pad, it's the epicenter of social life. Imagine sharing your living room with a dozen family members, plus livestock, and you get the picture. Privacy, that's a luxury reserved for the afterlife. Here, stories are currency, and after a morning battling the North Atlantic, nothing beats a good tale about Thor's latest escapades or Loki's mischief. Storytelling wasn't just about entertainment, it was a vital part of maintaining social cohesion. The Vikings didn't have Netflix, but they did have Skalds. The original binge-watch creators who shared epic sagas and heroic deeds, spun with as much flair as a modern-day Instagram influencer. These stories served to reinforce values and shared history, crucial for a community that depended on mutual support for survival. Now, if you thought the Longhouse was crowded, wait until you hear about the Thing. No, not the latest gadget, but the Viking legal assembly. Picture a gathering of bearded men in woolen cloaks debating the finer points of law and order. These were the original Icelandic TED Talks, where disputes were settled with words. Or, if that failed, a duel. Think of it as a combination of a courtroom, a town hall meeting, and a reality TV showdown, minus the commercial breaks. The Thing was a place where every free man had a voice, and consensus was the name of the game. This wasn't democracy as we know it, but for the Vikings, it worked. Decisions were made, grievances aired, and disputes resolved in a manner that was surprisingly civil. Unless, of course, someone decided that swords were more persuasive than speeches. The threat of a duel was often enough to keep debates lively, but mostly verbal. After all, losing an argument was preferable to losing a limb. Social structures in Viking society were as rigid as the oars you rowed with. At the top were the chieftains, the power players with the most to gain from a well-ordered society. Below them were the free men, the farmers and fishermen who kept things running. Then there were the thralls, essentially slaves, whose labour was the backbone of Viking prosperity. It was a hierarchy as clear as a fjord on a sunny day, and everyone knew their place. But don't be fooled into thinking it was all smooth sailing. Viking society was a precarious balance of power, and the Thing was where this balance was negotiated. If you're imagining a bunch of Vikings sitting around a table, sipping mead and making decisions, think again. These were outdoor affairs, held in open fields, because why not add unpredictable weather to the mix? Rain or shine, the Thing carried on, a testament to the Viking spirit of resilience. And speaking of resilience, let's not forget the women. While Viking men might get the historical spotlight, women were often the ones running the show behind the scenes. From managing the household to taking charge of family business when the men were away, women held considerable sway. They might not have had a seat at the Thing, but their influence was felt in every decision, a silent power that was as formidable as any warrior's axe. As you finish your lunch of dried fish, washed down with some pleasantly fermented ale, it's time to reflect on the social fabric that holds this world together. It's a tapestry woven with the threads of community, storytelling, and a legal system that's as much about maintaining peace as it is about asserting power. These aren't just historical footnotes. They're the building blocks of a society that's as complex as it is fascinating. But let's not get too cozy in the past. Remember, this is a world where harsh realities lurk around every corner. The weather could turn on you faster than a disgruntled berserker, and even the most well-laid plans can fall apart. It's a reminder that while the Viking Age might be long gone, its lessons about resilience, community, and the power of a good story are timeless. As the day wears on and the shadows lengthen, you're left with a sense of awe at the ingenuity and adaptability of the Viking people. They navigated a world as unforgiving as the seas they sailed, building a society that thrived in the face of adversity. And while their stories might be filled with gods, giants, and epic battles, the true legend of the Vikings is one of survival, community, and the relentless pursuit of a better life. And so, as you prepare to rejoin your Viking comrades for the evening's gathering, remember that the stories you've heard and the lessons you've learned are more than just echoes of a distant past. They are a testament to the enduring spirit of a people who faced the world head-on, armed with little more than courage, community, and a healthy respect for the unpredictable nature of life. And so, with the sun making its hasty exit like it's got a hot date on the other side of the horizon, it's time to drag the day's catch back to shore. If you've ever tried to haul a wet, flailing fish onto a boat, You know, it's a bit like wrestling a slippery toddler who's discovered the joys of soap. But this is what stands between you and a winter of rumbling stomachs, so you grit your teeth and get on with it. Now, let's talk preservation. In a land where the summer is basically a brief flirtation with warmth, keeping your ocean bounty edible until the next catch isn't as simple as tossing it in the fridge. Enter salt, the great preservative. Back in the day, salt wasn't just a seasoning, it was a lifeline. Imagine it as the Viking equivalent of duct tape holding everything together. Salting fish was a bit of an art form. First, you'd gut and clean your catch because nobody likes a fish with a side of guts. Then layer it with salt in barrels. This wasn't just any old table salt, mind you. It often came from sun-dried sea salt or, for the more adventurous, the smoke-cured variety. Either way, this process helped the fish last longer than that New Year's resolution you made about eating fewer carbs. But let's not gloss over the economics here. Salt wasn't cheap. In fact, it was a hot commodity. You might have to trade a good chunk of your catch just to get enough salt to preserve the rest. It was a classic case of spending money to make, or in this case, save money. The irony isn't lost on you as you realize your catch of the day is being steadily whittled down. But it's a small price to pay for the luxury of not dying of hunger. And speaking of trading, let's dive into the Viking marketplace. No Amazon Prime here, folks. Instead, you've got a bartering system that's as complex as a modern tax code. Icelandic communities, isolated by geography but connected by necessity, developed a network that would make any logistics manager proud. Fish were swapped for essentials like grain, timber, and even the occasional luxury item like, say, a new iron pot to replace the one that finally gave up the ghost after too many encounters with the fire. This trading network extended far beyond Iceland's shores. Picture Viking longships laden with dried fish, setting sail for the British Isles or even the European mainland. It's like a historical version of the Great British Bake Off, but instead of cakes, you've got barrels of fish. The Norse weren't just marauding warriors, they were savvy traders who understood the value of a well-timed barter. And here's where we shatter another myth, the lone Viking hero, conquering lands with nothing but an axe and a scowl. Reality check. These guys were team players. Sure, the sagas loved to paint a picture of solitary warriors carving out their destinies with brute strength, but survival in Viking society was a group effort. It took a village to raise a ship, and it took a community to keep that ship's crew fed, clothed, and ready for whatever the world threw at them. The collaborative spirit of the Vikings was more than just a necessity. It was a way of life. When winter settled over Iceland like an unwelcome houseguest who refuses to leave, it was the combined effort of fishermen, farmers, and artisans that kept the fires burning and the bellies full. The lone wolf might make for a great story, but in reality it was the pack that thrived. And as the evening settles in, with the sky painted in shades of twilight, you find yourself back at the longhouse, surrounded by the warmth of your fellow villagers. The day's catch is salted and stored, ready to be traded or eaten as needed. The air is filled with the sounds of laughter, stories, and the occasional argument over who gets the last piece of dried fish. This is the heart of Viking life. Not the romanticized battles or the legendary voyages, but the everyday grind of living in harmony with the land and sea. It's a life of resilience and adaptation, where every day is a lesson in survival and every night a celebration of making it through another day. And so, as you sit by the fire, surrounded by the people who make this harsh world a little less daunting, you realize that the true strength of the Vikings wasn't in their swords or their ships, but in their ability to work together. It's a lesson that echoes through the ages, reminding us that even in the toughest times, community is our greatest ally. As the fire crackles and the stories flow, you're reminded that while the Viking age is long gone, its lessons endure. So, here's to the fishermen, the unsung heroes of the sagas, who day by day, catch by catch, helped build a legacy that still captures our imaginations. And as you drift off to sleep, the embers glowing softly, you carry with you the knowledge that history isn't just about what happened, but about what we learn from it and how it shapes our own journeys. So, as you sit there beside the hearth, with the warmth of the fire seeping into your bones like a comforting old sweater, let's talk about what really made the Vikings tick. It wasn't all raids and ravaging, though, let's be honest. Those sagas make for some killer bedtime stories. No, the Vikings were master adapters, evolving from fearsome raiders into savvy traders and settlers who knew when to sheathe the sword and pick up the plough. Now, we've all heard the tales of those longboats cutting through misty waters, axes in hand, ready to plunder some unsuspecting coastal town. But by the 11th century, many Vikings were hanging up their battle gear. Why, you ask? Because the allure of trade routes and fertile lands was far more enticing than the fleeting thrill of a raid. Imagine this. You could risk life and limb for a quick haul, or you could settle down, grow some barley, and trade that surplus for a new set of iron tools or a sturdy milk cow. Spoiler alert, most Vikings were going for option B. The political landscape was changing faster than a berserker's temper. With the spread of Christianity and the formation of kingdoms, raiding lost its charm. Monarchs wanted taxes, not tales of valour. In England, the days of paying off Vikings with Danegeld, the sort of "please don't raid us" tax, gave way to integrating these Norsemen into the fabric of society. It was like the ultimate corporate merger, minus the conference calls. Let's not forget the allure of land. Iceland, with its harsh climate and tougher-than-nails terrain, was just a stepping stone. The real prize lay further afield. Vikings settled in places like Normandy, named after the Norsemen themselves, and even ventured as far as Russia and the Mediterranean. They were the original globetrotters, understanding that a good trade deal could be as rewarding as any conquest. But what about those horned helmets? Ah, the pièce de résistance of Viking myths. Picture this. You're a Victorian-era opera fan, and you want to jazz up your production of Wagner's Der Ring der Nibelungen. What do? Slap some horns on a helmet, of course. Voila, instant drama. Alas, real Viking helmets were practical, not theatrical. They were designed to protect, not to make a fashion statement. Archaeological evidence, or the lack thereof, tells us that horned helmets were as rare as a Viking abstaining from mead. So, no, you won't find any historical Viking selfies featuring those infamous headpieces. As the fire crackles and the night deepens, you can almost hear the echoes of those Viking traders and settlers. Their adaptability wasn't just about survival, it was about thriving. They understood that to prosper, sometimes you had to change course, literally. This wasn't just a cultural shift, it was a strategic pivot that ensured their legacy would endure long after their swords had rusted away. And here's the kicker. While their warrior image might dominate pop culture, it's the flexibility and foresight of the Vikings that truly set them apart. They embraced new lands, new gods, and new opportunities with the kind of entrepreneurial spirit that would make a Silicon Valley CEO nod in approval. They were pragmatists at heart, balancing the thrill of exploration with the cold, hard calculus of survival. So, as you drift off, head resting on a pillow of woven wool and dreams of distant lands swirling in your mind, remember that the Vikings were more than just the sum of their raids. They were pioneers and poets, traders and tacticians. Their real legacy is one of resilience and reinvention, a testament to the enduring power of adaptability. And as the embers glow softly, you're left with the knowledge that history isn't just about the stories we tell. It's about the lessons we learn and the paths we choose to tread. And there you have it, the Viking Age, distilled into a tale of transformation and tenacity. As you close your eyes, wrapped in the warmth of the past, know that you've journeyed through a world where the sea was both a highway and a harbinger, where community was a lifeline, and where the future belonged to those who dared to adapt. So here's to the Vikings, traders, settlers, and the original masters of reinvention. Sleep well, with the knowledge that the spirit of the Vikings, much like the sea they sailed, is vast, ever-changing, and deeply profound. In the bustling market square of Nicaea around 19 BCE, young Hipparchus was probably more interested in the stars twinkling above than the haggling over olives and amphorae happening below. While the rest of the city was bartering for essentials, Hipparchus was bargaining with the universe itself, trying to make sense of the chaos that seemed to swirl around him. You see, back in those days, astronomy wasn't just a hobby for old men with long beards. It was a field ripe for exploration and, let's be honest, a fair amount of guesswork. Greek understanding of the cosmos back then was charmingly naive. They believed in celestial spheres and thought the heavens were perfect and unchanging. To them, the stars were just decorative stickers on a giant celestial dome. But Hipparchus, our curious protagonist, wasn't buying this celestial wallpaper narrative. He smelled something fishy. Or perhaps he just noticed that the stars didn't stay put, like everyone said they did. Hipparchus's education was top-notch by the standards of the ancient world. He had access to the works of earlier thinkers like Eudoxus and Aristarchus, who, to their credit, had already started poking holes in the sky with their theories. Aristarchus, in particular, had the audacity to suggest that the Earth might actually revolve around the Sun. Audacious, right? Sadly, his ideas were about as popular as soggy bread, so they didn't catch on. But Hipparchus, with his insatiable curiosity, filed this away for future reference. Imagine the scene, a young Hipparchus surrounded by scrolls, peering skyward with a determination that could only be rivaled by a toddler reaching for a cookie jar. His tools were rudimentary by today's standards, a simple gnomon, a few star charts, and a mind sharper than Zeus's thunderbolt. But in the world of ancient astronomy, these were the cutting-edge gadgets, the equivalent of having the latest smartphone in your pocket. It was like trying to chart the cosmos with a stick and the back of a papyrus receipt, yet somehow he made it work. Hipparchus began questioning the status quo, which was no small feat in a society that revered tradition almost as much as their gods. His skepticism was like throwing a stone in a placid pond. It rippled through the established doctrines of the time. He understood that to truly grasp the universe, he'd have to challenge the cosmic comfort zone of his forebears. It was a bit like questioning why everyone insists on putting pineapple on pizza, controversial yet necessary. Despite the apparent absurdity of ancient technology, there was a certain charm to it. Hipparchus's astrolabe, for instance, was essentially a glorified protractor, yet it was revolutionary for its time. It allowed him to measure the angles of stars above the horizon, giving him the data he needed to start forming his own theories. And when you're working with basic tools like these, every measurement felt like a eureka moment, or at least a step closer to one. In a world where the prevailing wisdom held that the stars were nailed to the sky by divine decree, Hipparchus dared to suggest that they might be moving after all. Stars, he noted, had this pesky habit of not staying put. This wasn't just idle speculation. He backed it up with observations, noting the shift in the position of the stars over decades. This was the beginning of what we now call the precession of the equinoxes, a discovery that was a game-changer in the field of astronomy. It was like finding out that gravity works on your day off too. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. At this point, Hipparchus was still the young upstart, challenging the cosmic order of things. His early observations were the first cracks in the perfect celestial sphere envisioned by his predecessors. His work laid the groundwork for the giants of astronomy who would follow. Without Hipparchus, there'd be no Copernicus, no Galileo, and certainly no star status for astronomy itself. Yet, despite his groundbreaking work, Hipparchus wasn't exactly living the high life. His pursuits were fueled more by passion than by profit. There was no Patreon for astronomers in 190 BCE, no lucrative book deals or lecture tours. His work was driven by a relentless curiosity, a need to understand the cosmos, not just as it appeared, but as it truly was. In a world that valued the status quo, Hipparchus was a refreshing anomaly, a thinker who dared to dream beyond the stars, even if his tools were more Flintstones than Jetsons. So here we have young Hipparchus, the original cosmic detective, laying the foundation for modern astronomy with nothing more than a few primitive tools and a whole lot of imagination. He was a man who looked at the stars and didn't just wonder what they were, but why they were, and perhaps most importantly, where they were headed. And that, dear friends, is where our story truly begins. As Hipparchus set out to map the heavens, he knew he was about to face a challenge that would make even Hercules break a sweat. After all, capturing the universe on papyrus was a bit more complex than simply playing connect the dots. This wasn't just a matter of jotting down a few twinkling lights in the sky. It was about meticulously documenting their positions, brightness, and movements. His star catalogue was nothing short of an ancient Google Maps for the cosmos, pinpointing the locations of 850 stars with painstaking precision. That's right, 850 stars. Each one a testament to nights spent under the Grecian sky, squinting at celestial bodies like they were the last cookie in the jar. Now, you might wonder, how did Hipparchus pull off such a feat with technology that makes a sundial look high-tech? Well, his secret weapon was none other than the astrolabe. This nifty gadget, essentially a glorified protractor, allowed him to measure the altitude of stars above the horizon. It was the iPhone of the ancient world, minus the angry birds and social media distractions. With his astrolabe in hand, Hipparchus could track the stars' positions with remarkable accuracy, noting their movement across the sky like a cosmic traffic cop. And, as if mapping the stars wasn't enough, Hipparchus also decided to tackle the mysteries of trigonometry. Yes, while others were busy pondering their horoscopes or consulting the Oracle of Delphi for life advice, Hipparchus was busy inventing the mathematical tools that would eventually lay the groundwork for fields like architecture, engineering, and yes, even those pesky high school math classes. He introduced the concept of dividing the circle into 360 degrees, a decision that still baffles anyone who's ever tried to do math without a calculator. But hey, it's also why we celebrate birthdays with cakes cut into neat slices instead of, say, 365 or 1000. His trigonometry tables were a game changer, providing a mathematical foundation for calculating angles and distances. It was like giving the world a cosmic ruler, allowing future astronomers to measure the heavens with mathematical precision rather than mere guesswork. This was no small potatoes, folks. It was a giant leap for stargazers everywhere. Hipparchus's work was akin to giving the world its first GPS, ensuring that future travelers, and by travelers I mean planets and stars, could find their way across the sky with ease. Still, not everyone was impressed. While Hipparchus was busy cataloguing stars and crunching numbers, many of his contemporaries were more interested in astrology than astronomy. To them, the stars were less about scientific discovery and more about predicting if they'd finally meet their soulmate or if Mercury was in retrograde again. The practical applications of Hipparchus's work were lost on those who would rather consult the stars for a good harvest than understand why those stars moved in the first place. For them, Hipparchus was the guy at the party talking about quantum physics while everyone else just wanted to dance. Yet, despite the skepticism, Hipparchus pressed on. He understood that the universe was a complex machine, and he was determined to figure out its inner workings, one star at a time. His meticulous star catalogue was like a time capsule, preserving the positions of stars for future generations to study and expand upon. Without his foundational work, those who came after him, like Ptolemy, might have been left scratching their heads in confusion, or worse, consulting their horoscopes for guidance. But let's not forget the economic context in which Hipparchus operated. This wasn't a time when you could just apply for a research grant or fund your studies through Kickstarter. No, Hipparchus's work was largely self-financed, driven by an insatiable curiosity rather than financial gain. It was a labor of love, a testament to his dedication to understanding the universe in a way that transcended the materialistic concerns of his time. In a world where the average Greek was more worried about putting food on the table than mapping the stars, Hipparchus was an outlier, a visionary who saw the bigger picture, quite literally. And so Hipparchus continued his tireless pursuit of knowledge, even as his contemporaries raised their eyebrows and checked their horoscopes to see if a new era of enlightenment was written in the stars. His work laid the groundwork for future astronomers and mathematicians, proving that with enough grit and determination, one could indeed reach for the stars and bring a little piece of the cosmos back down to Earth. As Hipparchus gazed up at the night sky, mapping the heavens one star at a time, he was doing more than just documenting celestial bodies. He was challenging the very notion that the universe was a static, unchanging entity. In his observations, he found evidence of a dynamic cosmos, one in which stars moved, shifted, and occasionally danced to their own celestial tune. It was a revelation that flew in the face of conventional wisdom, one that required the kind of boldness and courage usually reserved for heroes of myth and legend. Sure, there were those who dismissed his work as little more than a cosmic crossword puzzle, but Hipparchus knew better. He understood that the universe was a vast, interconnected web of mysteries waiting to be unraveled, and he was determined to do just that, even if it meant defying the expectations of his time. His star catalogue was more than just a collection of data points. It was a testament to the power of human curiosity and the drive to understand the world around us. In the end, Hipparchus's work was a testament to the idea that knowledge is worth pursuing for its own sake. It was a reminder that even in a world obsessed with the here and now, there will always be those who look to the stars and see not just points of light, but glimpses of the infinite possibilities that lie beyond. And as Hipparchus continued to map the cosmos, one star at a time, he left behind a legacy that would inspire generations of astronomers to follow in his footsteps, proving that sometimes the greatest discoveries are made not by those who seek answers, but by those who dare to ask the right questions. Hipparchus's journey to uncover the secrets of the universe had brought him to the threshold of one of astronomy's most mind-bending mysteries, the precession of the equinoxes. Now, if you're wondering what that mouthful of a term means, think of it as the slow, graceful wobble of the Earth's rotational axis. A bit like a top winding down, except this cosmic spin takes about 26,000 years for a full rotation. And here's where it gets wild. Hipparchus figured this out over 2 millennia ago, long before anyone had even dreamed of telescopes or office chairs that spin. Let's set the scene. Around 30 BCE, Hipparchus noticed something peculiar while comparing his own star catalogue to those of his predecessors. He realized that the positions of the stars seemed to have shifted ever so slightly over the centuries. It was as if the cosmos had a secret, slow dance that no one had been invited to, except for our savvy stargazer, of course. Hipparchus's calculations showed an annual shift of about 1 degree every 72 years. This might sound tiny, but in the grand cosmic ballroom, it was enough to change the backdrop over a millennium. Now, before you start imagining some ancient Greek version of a high-tech observatory, let's talk about his tools, or lack thereof. Hipparchus didn't have access to fancy gadgets. His equipment was more bedrock than Silicon Valley. We're talking a gnomon, a few rudimentary star charts, and his trusty astrolabe. The precision with which he measured the stars' positions was nothing short of miraculous. It's like painting the Mona Lisa with a toothbrush, yet somehow he managed to capture the cosmos with startling accuracy. To appreciate Hipparchus's ingenuity, consider the challenge of measuring angles in the sky without a calculator or even Arab numerals. He relied on a sexagesimal system, a base 60 counting method borrowed from the Babylonians that would make any modern mathematician break into a cold sweat. This method, however, allowed him to break down celestial measurements into degrees, minutes, and seconds, laying the groundwork for the trigonometric tables that would come later. Hipparchus wasn't just observing, he was laying the mathematical foundations for future generations of astronomers to build upon. In the grand scheme of things, the discovery of the precession of the equinoxes was like finding out that the universe had a hidden variable, one that subtly but surely altered the celestial landscape over time. It was a revelation that transformed the way we understand the cosmos. Suddenly, the heavens weren't an immovable fixture, but a dynamic system, one that changed and evolved, just like the Earth itself. Hipparchus had essentially cracked the code of the celestial sphere, revealing a universe in motion. Of course, this discovery didn't immediately catapult Hipparchus to fame or fortune. In fact, most of his contemporaries were too busy consulting their horoscopes to pay much attention to some obscure astronomical shift. The practical implications of precession wouldn't be fully understood until centuries later. But in the world of ancient astronomy, Hipparchus was a trailblazer, daring to challenge the notion of a static universe and paving the way for the scientific revolutions to come. What's remarkable is that Hipparchus managed all this without the benefit of modern conveniences. There was no telescope to peer deeper into space, no computer to crunch the numbers. His laboratory was the night sky, his data recorded painstakingly on papyrus. It's a testament to the power of human curiosity and determination. While others might have been content with the celestial status quo, Hipparchus looked up and saw a puzzle waiting to be solved, and he couldn't resist the challenge. But let's not romanticize this too much. Hipparchus wasn't some lone genius scribbling away in an idyllic Greek garden. The reality was far more grounded. He worked in a world where scientific inquiry was often overshadowed by superstition and tradition. His findings were groundbreaking, but they didn't lead to immediate accolades or support. In fact, if you had asked the average Greek about Hipparchus's work, they might have shrugged and gone back to worrying about the latest crop yield. Yet, despite the lack of immediate recognition, Hipparchus's work endured. His discovery of the precession of the equinoxes was a monumental step forward in our understanding of the universe. It was proof that the heavens were not eternal and unchanging, but a complex, dynamic system subject to the same forces and changes that govern the Earth. This revelation would eventually influence the likes of Copernicus and Newton, who stood on the shoulders of giants like Hipparchus to expand our understanding of the cosmos even further. In the end, Hipparchus's legacy is a testament to the power of observation and inquiry. He didn't just accept the universe as it appeared, he questioned, calculated, and ultimately revealed its hidden truths. His work was a reminder that even in a world dominated by myth and superstition, there is always room for the bold and the curious to uncover the secrets of the stars. And as we continue to explore the universe today, we owe a debt to pioneers like Hipparchus, who dared to look up and dream beyond the celestial dome, turning the heavens from a static canopy into a dynamic, ever-evolving tapestry. And while Hipparchus was busy unraveling the mysteries of the cosmos, the world below his feet was just as chaotic, a swirling cauldron of economic and political upheaval. You see, Hipparchus didn't live in some academic bubble, blissfully ignorant of worldly affairs. Nope, he was smack dab in the middle of a Mediterranean soap opera, with the Roman Empire playing the role of the ever-encroaching antagonist. Now, let's set the stage for the economic and political landscape of Hipparchus's time. Picture Greece in the 2nd century BCE, a land of philosophers and warriors, but also of economic strain and political turbulence. The once mighty Greek city-states were now mere chess pieces on the Roman board, their territories increasingly swallowed by Roman expansion. It was like a cosmic game of Monopoly, with Rome buying up all the properties and leaving Greece with little more than a few utilities and a railroad. In this era of imperial overreach, scientific pursuits weren't exactly high on the list of priorities. The average Greek was more concerned about Roman taxes than the positions of celestial bodies, but Hipparchus, ever the visionary, found a way to keep his head in the stars while staying grounded in reality. He navigated these turbulent times with the finesse of a modern-day academic hustling for grants, relying on the ancient equivalent of crowdfunding, patronage. Patronage was the lifeblood of intellectuals like Hipparchus. Wealthy benefactors, often with more drachmas than they knew what to do with, would sponsor scholars in exchange for a bit of intellectual prestige. It was a win-win situation. The patron got to boast about their enlightened pursuits at dinner parties, and the scholar received the financial support needed to fund their research. For Hipparchus, this meant securing the resources to continue his astronomical investigations without getting entangled in the messy business of politics. But finding a patron wasn't as simple as swiping right on a wealthy benefactor's profile. It required networking, charm, and a bit of luck, qualities that Hipparchus seemed to possess in spades. He managed to attract the attention of patrons who appreciated the value of his work, even if they didn't quite grasp the intricacies of precession or trigonometry. In a world where scientific inquiry was often overshadowed by military conquests and political machinations, securing patronage was like winning the academic lottery. Of course, Hipparchus had to tread carefully. The political landscape was as volatile as a Greek tragedy, with shifting alliances and backstabbing aplenty. Rome's influence in the region was growing, and Greek territories were increasingly caught in the crossfire. For scholars like Hipparchus, it was a balancing act, staying on the good side of the ruling powers while avoiding the political fray. One wrong move, and your patron could find themselves out of favour, leaving you without support faster than you could say heliocentric. But Hipparchus was no fool. He understood the importance of playing the long game, focusing on his research while keeping a watchful eye on the political weather. His ability to remain apolitical allowed him to continue his work uninterrupted, even as the world around him shifted like the celestial spheres he studied. It was a testament to his savvy as much as his scientific brilliance that he managed to thrive in such uncertain times. Amidst the backdrop of Roman encroachment, Hipparchus's work was more than just a scholarly pursuit. It was an act of resistance against the intellectual stagnation that threatened to take hold. In a world obsessed with power and conquest, he dared to look beyond the immediate and the material, seeking answers in the stars rather than the battlefield. His relentless pursuit of knowledge was a quiet rebellion against the status quo, a reminder that there was more to life than the whims of emperors and generals. And while Hipparchus's name might not have been on the lips of every Roman senator, his legacy was already taking root. His discovery of the precession of the equinoxes was a subtle yet profound shift in the understanding of the cosmos, one that would echo through the halls of academia for centuries to come. It was proof that even in the darkest times, there is always room for light, both literal and metaphorical, from the stars above. So, as Hipparchus continued to map the heavens and decode the celestial mysteries, he did so against the backdrop of a world in flux. His work was a beacon of intellectual curiosity in an age of uncertainty, a testament to the enduring power of human inquiry. And while he may have been just one man with a gnomon and an astrolabe, his impact was celestial, transcending the political and economic turmoil of his time to leave an indelible mark on the history of science. In the grand cosmic ballet, Hipparchus was both a participant and an observer, documenting the movements of the stars while navigating the shifting tides of his own era. His story is a reminder that even in the face of adversity, there is always a path forward for those willing to look up and ask the right questions. And as the Roman Empire continued its march across the Mediterranean, Hipparchus remained steadfast in his pursuit of the stars, guided not by the whims of fate, but by the constellations he so meticulously charted. And so, as the Roman legions marched ever onward, Hipparchus remained steadfast, his eyes fixed on the stars while his feet stayed firmly planted on the shifting sands of his era. Our celestial detective was more than just a man charting the skies. He was essentially laying down the interstellar roadmap for future explorers. Enter Claudius Ptolemy, the astronomer who would later take Hipparchus's scattered breadcrumbs and whip up a banquet of astronomical knowledge that would feast through antiquity and into the Renaissance like some kind of cosmic buffet. Now, Ptolemy wasn't just any old astronomer. He was the Beyoncé of ancient stargazers. His magnum opus, the Almagest, was like the Spotify playlist of celestial knowledge, a greatest hits compilation that included much of Hipparchus's foundational work. Ptolemy's model of the universe, where the Earth sat centre stage with celestial bodies pirouetting around it in perfect circles, was not unlike imagining the universe as one giant cosmic disco ball, glittery, appealing, and yes, completely wrong. It was Hipparchus's observations that fueled this glitzy geocentric model, which would hold sway for over 1,000 years before Copernicus crashed the party with his heliocentric revelation. But let's not throw shade on Ptolemy just yet. While it's easy to scoff at the inaccuracies of his Earth-centered universe, it's worth noting that his work was the academic darling of its day. The Almagest didn't just ride on Hipparchus's coattails, it expanded on them, refining his trigonometric tables and introducing the eccentric circles and epicycles that would keep astronomers scratching their heads until Kepler finally showed up with a cosmic eraser. Ptolemy's work was like the original iOS, innovative, flawed, and the foundation for everything that followed. But here's the kicker. While Ptolemy got all the glory, Hipparchus remained the unsung hero, the wizard behind the curtain. You see, Ptolemy had the benefit of living in a time when Alexandria was the intellectual capital of the world, with resources and libraries that Hipparchus could only dream of. It's the classic tale of the tortoise and the hare, except in this case, the tortoise never got the public accolades. Ptolemy took Hipparchus's raw data and polished it into a coherent system, like turning a rough diamond into the crown jewels. Yet, without Hipparchus's foundational observations, Ptolemy might have been left gazing at the stars, confused and underwhelmed, like someone trying to assemble IKEA furniture without the instructions. Of course, the romanticized narrative of Hipparchus as a lone genius under the Aegean skies is as tempting as it is misleading. The reality? He was just one of many scholars in a world where scientific thought was often overshadowed by mythology and mysticism. There were no fancy observatories or teams of assistants, just a man, his astrolabe, and a voracious appetite for knowledge. Hipparchus wasn't some rugged lone wolf. He was part of the broader tapestry of Greek intellectual life, a tapestry that often got tangled in the politics and economic constraints of the time. Speaking of which, let's not forget the economic backdrop that provided the stage for these astronomical feats. Hipparchus didn't have the luxury of crowdfunding campaigns or academic tenure. He was living in an age where the economy was more likely to be driven by Roman expansion than intellectual pursuit. Picture this: a world where wealthy patrons were more interested in funding gladiatorial games than star catalogues. It was a hustle, as much about securing patronage as it was about making groundbreaking discoveries. In short, Hipparchus had to be more than just a brilliant mind. He needed to be a shrewd negotiator, a diplomat who could parlay his findings into the kind of support that would allow him to continue his work. As we sift through the sands of time, it's crucial to separate the legend from the man. Hipparchus wasn't a mythical figure casting spells with star charts. He was a relentless observer, unyielding in his quest to understand the cosmos. His legacy lies not in the romantic notions of a starry-eyed dreamer, but in the hard, cold data he meticulously gathered. His work was the bedrock upon which future generations built their celestial empires. Without Hipparchus, astronomy might have remained a curiosity, a pastime for the idle rich, rather than the cornerstone of scientific discovery. And yet, it's the myth that endures, isn't it? The image of an ancient astronomer, peering into the night sky, seeking answers written in starlight, resonates with our deep-rooted desire to explore the unknown. In an era where the divine was often seen as the ultimate answer, Hipparchus dared to ask questions, to challenge the narrative that the heavens were perfect and immutable. His legacy is a testament to the power of human curiosity, a reminder that even in the most tumultuous times, there are those who will look beyond the immediate, the tangible, the predictable, to seek out the mysteries of the universe. In the end, Hipparchus's story is one of quiet revolution. It's a narrative that defies the notion of the lone genius, instead highlighting the collaborative, cumulative nature of scientific discovery. His work laid the groundwork for the Copernican revolution, and beyond, proving that even the most modest observatory can launch 1,000 breakthroughs. Hipparchus didn't just observe the stars, he challenged their permanence, their authority, and in doing so, he set humanity on a path of celestial discovery that continues to this day. So, as you lay your head down tonight, perhaps take a moment to gaze up at the stars. Remember that each one is not just a point of light, but part of a story that began over 2 millennia ago with a Greek mathematician who dared to chart the heavens. Hipparchus's legacy is a testament to the enduring power of human inquiry and the unending quest to understand the universe that surrounds us. In a world where the only constant is change, his work reminds us that the sky is not the limit, it's just the beginning. In the vast, frozen expanse of the Arctic, where the sun plays a game of hide-and-seek, sometimes vanishing for months at a time, the Inuit people crafted stories that could rival the most chilling Netflix series. These tales, born of necessity and imagination, not only explained the harsh world around them, but also brought a touch of warmth to icy nights. We're diving into a world where the supernatural was as real as the snow beneath their feet. Let's start with Sedna, the sea goddess who could have given Ursula from The Little Mermaid a run for her money. Sedna's story is as tempestuous as the Arctic seas she ruled. Depending on who's telling the tale, she was a beautiful maiden, a rebellious daughter, or a victim of betrayal. Her father, trying to appease the spirits and save himself, tossed her into the ocean where she transformed into a goddess. As a deity, she wasn't your average benevolent figure. If dissatisfied, Sedna had a penchant for holding back the sea's bounty, causing famine until shamans appeased her. Talk about high maintenance. But why did the Inuit weave such intricate myths? The answer lies in their history and environment. Around 1000 CE, the ancestors of the modern Inuit, known as the Thule people, migrated from Alaska across the Arctic. These weren't leisurely strolls, but survival treks across thousands of miles of unforgiving terrain. They settled in Greenland, Canada, and parts of Siberia, mastering the art of adaptation long before Darwin made it cool. With temperatures often plunging below 30 DC, every day was a battle against nature, a reality that shaped their storytelling, turning it into a tool for survival and community cohesion. The Arctic was more than a backdrop, it was a living character in their myths. The Inuit saw their world as a place where the line between the physical and metaphysical was as thin as ice in spring. Spirits abounded, lurking in every corner, some benevolent, others malevolent. It was a universe where the aurora borealis wasn't just a pretty light show, but the spirits of the dead playing ball with a walrus skull. Not exactly a hallmark moment, but it worked for them. Now, you might wonder how these seemingly fantastical stories held up in the face of harsh reality. The truth is, they provided a framework for understanding and coping with the unpredictability of life in the Arctic. When you're living in a place where a sudden blizzard can make a snow globe look like a beach holiday, having a narrative that explains the inexplicable is more than comforting. It's essential. The Inuit weren't just sitting around waiting for tales to come to them, they were active participants in their mythos. Storytelling was communal, a way to pass the long, dark winters and impart crucial knowledge to the next generation. This wasn't just entertainment, it was education with a side of drama. Through these stories, they taught their children survival skills and social norms, wrapped in thrilling narratives that could keep anyone, young or old, on the edge of their sealskin seats. It's fascinating to think how these myths have persisted, evolving over time yet retaining their core essence. Despite the encroachment of modernity and external influences, many Inuit communities still hold these stories close, a testament to their enduring power. They're not just relics of the past, but living, breathing pieces of cultural heritage that continue to resonate. The Inuits' migration, adaptation, and myth-making are a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. While the rest of the world might have been getting tangled in medieval politics and plagues, the Inuit were crafting a world where gods and spirits danced alongside them, helping them navigate the icy labyrinth of their existence. It's a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, imagination thrives, and sometimes that's all you need to survive. In this icy theatre of myths and legends, nature wasn't just part of the set, it was a lead actor with top billing. For the Inuit, every animal had a story to tell, a lesson to impart. Not to be outdone by Disney, they had moral tales starring polar bears, puffins, and the ever-clever ravens. Let's not forget the wolf, often portrayed as a guardian of wisdom. These stories weren't just bedtime fluff. They were survival manuals, cleverly disguised as entertainment. Let's start with the raven, a feathered trickster with a flair for mischief and transformation. In Inuit mythology, the raven wasn't just a bird but a creator and a cultural hero. Known for his cunning, he could shape-shift and outwit his foes. But why a raven, you ask? These birds are common in the Arctic, their black feathers stark against the snow, always on the lookout for a snack or a shiny object. The raven's resourcefulness and adaptability mirrored the Inuits' own survival skills, making it a fitting symbol for their stories. The wolf, meanwhile, had a reputation that would give any wise elder a run for their money. In a world where the line between predator and protector was as thin as a strand of caribou hair, wolves were respected and feared in equal measure. Their hunting prowess was legendary, and their pack mentality was something the Inuit admired and emulated. In fact, the Inuits' own hunting strategies often mirrored those of wolves, cooperative, strategic, and efficient. They weren't just hunting for sport, but for survival, and every successful hunt meant food and materials to last through the winter. Now it's easy to romanticize these tales and think the Inuit lived in perfect harmony with nature, like some Arctic Dr. Dolittle. But let's debunk that myth right here. The Inuits' relationship with their environment was more about pragmatism than mysticism. Sure, they respected the animals, but not out of some mystical connection. It was about survival, plain and simple. They hunted seals, whales, and caribou, not just because they had a spiritual bond, but because these animals provided essential resources. Food, clothing, tools, you name it. Take the seal hunt, for example. This wasn't a leisurely afternoon activity, but a carefully orchestrated operation. Seals were a lifeline, providing meat for sustenance and blubber for oil, which was crucial for heating and cooking. Hunting techniques were honed over generations, with the Inuit using tools like the harpoon and the kayak to navigate icy waters. These weren't just subsistence strategies, they were community lifelines, intricately tied to their stories and way of life. Now, when it comes to resource management, the Inuit were ahead of their time. They understood sustainability long before it became a buzzword. They knew how to read the land and the sea, moving with the seasons and never taking more than they needed. This wasn't some eco-friendly philosophy, but a necessity born of their harsh environment. Wastefulness could mean the difference between life and death, and their stories reinforced this lesson, reminding everyone of the balance between giving and taking from nature. And let's not forget the economic context. While the world was busy trading spices and silk, the Inuit had their own form of commerce. They traded with neighboring communities, exchanging goods like walrus ivory, caribou hides, and fish. This barter system was vital for acquiring materials they couldn't find locally, like wood for sleds or iron for tools. The stories they told reflected these interactions, embedding economic lessons within their mythical narratives. As we unravel these tales, it's tempting to get lost in the allure of a people in tune with their environment. But the reality was often stark and unforgiving. The Inuit didn't have the luxury of time to ponder their place in the cosmos. They were too busy navigating it, using every tool and tale at their disposal. Their stories, rich with animals and spirits, were as much about teaching practical lessons as they were about entertaining the masses. So, while it's easy to get swept up in the romance of these myths, let's not forget the gritty reality. The Inuit were storytellers, yes, but also survivalists par excellence. Their narratives are a testament to their ingenuity and resilience, a reminder that even in the harshest of climates, humanity has always found a way to thrive. As we continue exploring these myths, let's not just admire the beauty, let's appreciate the raw, unvarnished truth that lies beneath. Speaking of raw, unvarnished truths, let's dive into the world of Inuit shamans, who are less about waving wands and more about wielding influence. Forget the stereotype of a lone mystic in a snowy shack. These folks were integral to their communities, operating with a touch of showmanship and a heap of responsibility. In a place where a blizzard could spell doom, shamans were the ones calling the shots, or at least negotiating terms with the spirit world. First off, let's debunk that romantic notion of the shaman as some solitary guru. The reality was far more complex and political. Inuit shamans, or ungakuku as they were known, were often the rock stars of their villages, but not without their entourages. They had apprentices learning the ropes, community members who supported their work, and sometimes even rival shamans in neighbouring settlements. It's like the Arctic version of a 90s boy band, with all the drama and fanfare. These shamans weren't just mystical middlemen. They were doctors, therapists, and political advisors rolled into one sealskin-wrapped package. They wielded power not just through their supposed spiritual connections, but also through immense social acumen. They were the ones who had the ear of the community leaders, advising on everything from hunting strategies to conflict resolution. And let's be honest, in a place where missteps could lead to starvation or violence, their opinions carried a lot of weight. Historically speaking, archaeological digs and oral histories reveal that shamans were often chosen because of their personal attributes. They were smart, resourceful, and, most importantly, charismatic. You had to be, to convince a room full of skeptical hunters that the spirits had given you the go-ahead for the next seal hunt. It wasn't all about chanting and drum circles, it was about leadership skills and a knack for persuasion. And speaking of archaeologists, they've unearthed some fascinating evidence of shamanic practices. For instance, they found carved ivory and bone amulets believed to be used in rituals or as talismans. These artifacts, dating back several centuries, show that shamans were not just winging it. They had a toolkit that would make any modern-day medium envious. Plus, they had a flair for the dramatic performing in dimly lit igloos with flickering oil lamps, making sure every ritual was more Broadway than backroom seance. Now, let's talk about the community dynamics that kept these shamans in power. You might think it was all about spiritual prowess, but money, or its Arctic equivalent, often played a part. Shamans could receive gifts of food, clothing, or other goods for their services. In societies where resources were as scarce as a warm summer's day, this system of reciprocity ensured that shamans were well fed and well respected. It was a barter economy, and shamans were the savvy traders who knew how to work it. But before you get carried away with visions of opulent igloos, remember that with great power came great responsibility. Shamans were held accountable if things went south, literally. If the hunt failed, the crops withered, or sickness spread, the shaman often bore the brunt of the blame. It was a high-stakes gig, requiring a thick skin and a quick mind, as they navigated the fine line between revered healer and scapegoat. Think of it as being the CEO of Survival Inc., with the board of elders breathing down your neck. The role of the shaman was also deeply tied to the Inuits' view of the world. In a culture where the physical and spiritual realms were tightly intertwined, shamans acted as the bridge. They were believed to travel between worlds, communicating with spirits to bring back advice or warnings. This wasn't just a mystical journey, it was a political one too. By interpreting the whims of the spirits, shamans influenced decisions that could affect the entire community. It was a delicate dance, balancing personal influence with spiritual insight. So, what did these spiritual bingers actually accomplish? For one, they helped maintain social order. When conflicts arose, shamans were often called in to mediate. Their spiritual status gave them a unique authority, allowing them to broker peace or dole out justice. It wasn't just about keeping everyone happy, it was about ensuring the survival of the group. If you think about it, they were the original Arctic arbitrators, skilled in the art of compromise and resolution. As we delve deeper into the lives of these shamans, it's crucial to remember the broader socio-political structures that supported them. They weren't working in isolation. They were part of a complex web of relationships that included family ties, alliances with other shamans, and connections with community leaders. Their power was built on these relationships, and they had to constantly navigate this intricate landscape to maintain their influence. It's a reminder that even in the mystical world of shamanism, politics plays a pivotal role. And let's not forget the role of women in this shamanic tapestry. While men often dominated the spiritual spotlight, women could also be shamans. In fact, some historical accounts suggest that female shamans were particularly adept at healing and midwifery, using their skills to aid their communities in times of need. They may not have been as visible, but their contributions were vital, showcasing the often overlooked diversity within shamanistic traditions. So there you have it, shamans as the ultimate multitaskers, juggling the demands of spiritual leadership with the practicalities of daily life. They were healers, negotiators, and community linchpins, wielding a power that was as much about charisma and cunning as it was about spirits and rituals. As we peel back the layers of Inuit shamanism, we find a story not just of mysticism, but of survival, strategy, and social complexity. And if that's not a tale worth telling, I don't know what is. In the grand saga of Inuit mythology, shamans weren't just the local celebrities with a hotline to the spirit world. They were the glue holding the community together. But what happens when that glue gets tested by outsiders with their own sticky agendas? Enter the European explorers and missionaries, sailing in with their crosses, compasses, and a baffling lack of snow survival skills. Let's rewind to the 16th century, when the European age of exploration was in full swing. Driven by a thirst for new trade routes and a hunger for resources, explorers from England, France, and even Denmark began poking around the Arctic, maps in hand and frostbite in their future. Martin Frobisher, the English seafarer, made one of the first documented contacts with the Inuit in 1576. He was convinced he'd found gold in what was actually fool's gold, an apt metaphor for the cultural misunderstandings that followed. Now, what does a meeting between an Englishman in tights and an Inuit in furs look like? Cue the cultural comedy of errors. The Inuit, pragmatic and observant, saw these newcomers as curious oddities and potential trade partners, while the Europeans viewed them through a lens of mystified superiority. They marveled at the Inuits' ability to thrive in such harsh conditions, yet failed to understand the sophisticated social and spiritual systems underpinning their survival. As more Europeans ventured north, the Inuit world began to shrink under the weight of foreign influence. The 18th century saw the arrival of missionaries, and with them the cross-cultural clash of Christianity meeting Inuit spirituality head-on. The Moravian missionaries were particularly active, arriving in Labrador in the 1770s, and setting up missions that doubled as cultural bulldozers, chipping away at Inuit traditions. They came armed with Bibles and hymns, intent on saving souls and reshaping belief systems. Imagine the bewilderment of an Inuit community, steeped in stories of Sedna and the Raven, being told that their narratives were mere myths and a single book held all the answers. These missionaries were the original influences, albeit with a less glamorous wardrobe and a knack for proselytizing. They preached salvation, but often at the expense of cultural identity, dismissing shamanistic practices as paganism in need of purging. The impact was profound. By the mid-19th century, Christian conversion efforts had made significant inroads, often blending with Inuit beliefs in a syncretic dance of survival. Many Inuit incorporated elements of Christianity into their spiritual practices, creating a unique tapestry of old and new. Yet, this fusion didn't happen without friction. Shamanism, once a cornerstone of Inuit life, was increasingly marginalized, its practitioners often vilified or sidelined. But let's pause and debunk the romantic notion that the Inuit simply rolled over and accepted these changes. The reality was far more complex. While some communities embraced Christianity, others resisted, holding fast to their ancestral traditions. This wasn't just about spiritual allegiance. It was a struggle for cultural preservation in the face of an existential threat. Economically, the changes were equally seismic. The introduction of European goods altered traditional barter systems. Guns, metal tools, and textiles became coveted items, shifting the dynamics of trade and resource distribution. What was once a self-sufficient lifestyle now had to contend with the allure of imported goods, leading to dependencies that reshaped social structures. By the early 20th century, the Inuit were navigating a world transformed. The Hudson's Bay Company, with its trading posts, became a fixture in the Arctic, further integrating the Inuit into a global economic system. This new reality was a double-edged sword offering access to tools and technologies while eroding traditional ways. Yet, through it all, the spirit of Inuit resilience shone brightly. World War II and the Cold War brought new players to the Arctic stage, with military bases and radar stations dotting the landscape. The Inuit, ever adaptable, found ways to work within these systems, providing labour and local expertise. They weren't just passive observers of history, they were active participants, shaping and being shaped by these global events. Fast forward to modern times, and you'll find a renaissance of Inuit culture. The latter half of the 20th century saw a resurgence of interest in traditional practices, driven by a desire to reclaim identity and heritage. Language revitalization programs, cultural festivals, and the rise of Inuit art on the global stage are testaments to this revival. Organizations like the Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami in Canada and the Inuit Circumpolar Council are at the forefront, advocating for rights and recognition. The absurdity of past cultural misunderstandings now serves as a poignant reminder of the resilience and vibrancy of Inuit culture. While colonial and Christian influences left indelible marks, they also catalyzed a powerful movement of cultural preservation and revival. Inuit mythology, once threatened, now thrives in new forms, celebrated and passed down with pride. As we look to the future, the story of Inuit mythology isn't just about survival, it's about resurgence. In a world where cultural homogenization often seems inevitable, the Inuit offer a powerful narrative of resistance and renewal. Their myths, once whispered in igloos, now echo across the globe, a testament to the enduring power of stories and the indomitable spirit of a people who have always known how to weather the storm. And in this ongoing epic, there are still chapters to be written, tales to be told, and lessons to be learned. Stay tuned, because the best is yet to come. And as the ink dries on our narrative of Inuit mythology, we're not just talking about dusty old stories archived in the minds of elders or scribbled in obscure texts. We're talking about a living, breathing tradition that's as relevant today as a TikTok trend, only far more meaningful and with a lot more historical clout. The enduring legacy of these myths is woven into the very fabric of contemporary Inuit culture and identity, a testament to their resilience and adaptability. Inuit mythology, like a well-preserved sealskin, has found new life in modern media. From literature and art to film and digital storytelling, these ancient tales are being retold, reimagined, and revitalized in ways that speak to both traditional values and contemporary sensibilities. Take, for instance, the award-winning film Atanajuat, The Fast Runner, which brought to life an epic Inuit legend on the silver screen in 2001. Directed by Zacharias Kunuk, this cinematic masterpiece wasn't just a movie, it was a cultural milestone, produced entirely in the Inuktitut language and rooted deeply in Inuit storytelling traditions. It reminded the world that Inuit stories are not relics of the past, but vibrant narratives with universal themes of love, betrayal, and survival. But as these myths enter the global stage, they often encounter a treacherous iceberg romanticization by outsiders. Ah yes, the age-old allure of the noble savage trope, dressed up in seal skins and set against a backdrop of endless snow. It's a narrative that's been peddled by well-meaning but often misguided storytellers who cherry-pick elements of Inuit culture to fit a narrative of spiritual purity and ecological wisdom. While there's an undeniable beauty in the imagery of an ancient people living in harmony with nature, the reality is far more complex. The Inuits' relationship with their environment was born of necessity, not mysticism, a pragmatic dance of survival where every hunt was calculated and every resource meticulously managed. And let's not forget the economic and political forces at play. In the 21st century, the Inuit are navigating a world where climate change, resource extraction, and geopolitical interests are rewriting the Arctic's fate. The melting ice caps are not just an environmental concern, they're opening new shipping routes and revealing untapped reserves of oil and gas. Governments and corporations are circling like Arctic wolves, eager to sink their teeth into these new opportunities. For the Inuit, this means a delicate balancing act, preserving their cultural heritage and ecological landscape while engaging with the economic realities of a globalized world. In this context, the preservation of Inuit mythology is not just a cultural endeavor, it's a political act. Organizations like Inuit, Tapiriat, Kanatami in Canada, and the Inuit Circumpolar Council are at the forefront, advocating for Indigenous rights and cultural preservation. They're not just preserving stories, they're fighting for sovereignty and self-determination in a world that often overlooks the voices of Indigenous peoples. It's a battle that takes place not just in boardrooms, but in classrooms and community centers, where the next generation of Inuit is learning to speak their native languages and tell their own stories. The economic implications are profound. Tourism, driven by a growing interest in Indigenous cultures, offers both opportunities and challenges. While it provides a platform for sharing Inuit traditions with the world and generates income for communities, it also risks commodifying their culture for profit. It's a tightrope walk between showcasing the beauty of Inuit art and mythology and ensuring that it remains authentic and not diluted by the demands of the market. And speaking of art, let's not overlook the vital role it plays in this cultural renaissance. Inuit artists are drawing from their rich heritage, using traditional motifs and themes to create works that speak to contemporary issues. The Cape Dorset printmakers, for example, have gained international acclaim for their vibrant depictions of Inuit life and mythology, blending ancient stories with modern techniques and perspectives. These artists are not just preserving their culture, they're expanding it, challenging stereotypes and inviting the world to see Inuit identity in all its complexity and beauty. As we wrap up our exploration of Inuit mythology, it's clear that these ancient tales are far more than bedtime stories or cultural curiosities. They are a vital part of the Inuit identity, offering lessons in resilience, adaptability, and the human condition that resonate across time and space. In a world that often feels increasingly disconnected from its roots, the Inuit remind us of the power of storytelling to bridge past and present, to connect people and cultures, and to help us make sense of the world around us. So, as we close this chapter, let's carry forward the understanding that the legacy of Inuit mythology is not just a reflection of the past, but a living, evolving tapestry that continues to shape the present and future. It's a testament to the enduring power of stories to not only entertain, but educate, inspire, and unite us in the shared human experience. And as long as there are voices to tell them and ears to listen, these stories will continue to thrive, lighting the way for generations to come. Somewhere between ancient memory and the modern tech cloud lies the oral traditions of Indigenous Australia, a 65,000-year-old saga that predates even the oldest Egyptian pyramid scheme. Think of it as history's original USB drive, encoded in the melodies of chants and the vibrant tapestry of storytelling. Long before we could download our wisdom into silicon chips, Indigenous Australians were saving crucial files of knowledge and culture in the most reliable storage device ever, the human mind. Let's cut to the chase. These weren't just your average campfire tales to lull the kiddies to sleep. Dreamtime stories, or as they say in some Aboriginal languages, tukurpa, were the bedrock of social norms and environmental stewardship. They were as essential as a GPS is to a lost tourist. Imagine needing to know when to plant crops or where to find water without Google Maps or the Farmer's Almanac. The oral traditions had you covered with narratives that wove together the how, when, and why of survival. Now, to illustrate just how far back these stories go, we're talking 65,000 years. A number so staggering it makes ancient Rome look like a pop-up store. It's not just the continuity that blows the mind, but the precision. These oral traditions include references to geological events that modern science only recently confirmed, like volcanic eruptions and sea level changes. It's like finding out your grandma predicted the stock market crash of 1929 purely from knitting patterns. Dreamtime stories are more than mere whimsical yarns. They are meticulously crafted blueprints for living in harmony with the land. Take the story of the rainbow serpent, a creature that's not just a colourful figment of imagination, but a significant figure in many Aboriginal cosmologies. It's a narrative that embodies the creation of the world and the natural laws governing it. The rainbow serpent is said to have shaped the Earth's formations, carving out rivers and mountains, laying down the rules of the natural world like some ancient environmental architect. These stories also played the role of moral compass, guiding social behaviour and community norms. They were the original chicken soup for the soul, but with a lot more bite and less saccharine. For instance, tales of the mischievous trickster figure, often manifested as a dingo or crow, served as cautionary tales against hubris and greed, reminding folks to stay humble and share the resources. No need for a lengthy legal code when a well-told story could convey the same message with a lot more flair. But let's not romanticize this as a utopia of oral wisdom. While the storytelling tradition is a marvel of human ingenuity, it's also a testament to the resilience required to maintain it. With no written language to fall back on, everything depended on the precision of memory and the integrity of the storyteller. Imagine the pressure of remembering every detail of a story passed down through countless generations. It's like being a Wikipedia page that can't afford to have any inaccuracies because there's no edit button, just a lifetime of oral citation. These traditions were vital for survival, yes, but they were also crucial for maintaining the cultural identity of the diverse Aboriginal groups across Australia. There are over 250 distinct language groups, each with its own unique set of stories. This wasn't a monolithic culture, but a rich tapestry of narratives, each adding a thread to the broader story of human history. It's a bit like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but with more cultural depth and less CGI. The role of the storyteller was akin to being the village's living library, historian, and spiritual guide rolled into one. They didn't just recount the tales, they breathed life into them, ensuring that each generation understood its responsibilities to the land and each other. This isn't just history, it's a living, breathing practice that continues to be pivotal to the identity and resilience of Indigenous communities today. So, as we unravel these narratives, remember that they are more than just echoes of a distant past. They are vibrant, living connections to the land and the people who have called it home for tens of thousands of years. It's a lineage of knowledge that, despite the disruptive forces of colonization and modernity, continues to whisper its wisdom to those who listen. And in this digital age of fleeting attention spans and information overload, there's something profoundly grounding in that ancient rhythm of spoken word, binding us to the earth and each other, one story at a time. While we're still cruising along this highway of oral history, buckle up, because it's time to dive into the nitty-gritty of how these Indigenous Australian stories actually managed to stick around for tens of thousands of years, all without a single sticky note or smartphone reminder in sight. Picture this, mnemonic devices were the mental post-it notes of ancient storytellers. These weren't just random memory tricks, they were sophisticated systems that would make any modern-day memory champion break a sweat. Now, before you roll your eyes thinking this is just another memory palace routine, let me hit you with this. Indigenous cultures used a blend of rhythm, song, and landscape as memory aids. They had something called songlines, which were essentially the Google Maps of the time. Picture a vast outback, where every rock, tree, and river bends is a landmark in a sung narrative guiding you across the land. The idea is simple, yet brilliant. Each story threads through the landscape, turning geography into a map encoded with cultural and survival information. It's like turning the entire Earth into a living, breathing GPS, except without the annoying recalculating voice when you miss a turn. These oral maps weren't just about getting from A to B. They were packed with information about where to find food, the changing seasons, and even social laws. Imagine not just knowing the route to your neighbour's house, but also knowing the best time to plant your crops or avoid certain areas because an ancient ancestor might have had a bad day there once. It's the original multitasking, like singing your favourite song while driving and also getting life advice. But here's the kicker. The cadence and repetition built into these stories were more than mnemonic flair. They were the secret sauce to maintaining accuracy across generations. Think of it as the rhythmic backbone that kept the story from unravelling over time. This wasn't just for show, it was a necessity. The weight of cultural knowledge rested on the storyteller's shoulders, and any slip-up could mean losing vital information. It's like playing the most intense game of telephone ever, except you can't afford to mess it up because the survival of your community depends on it. The storytellers themselves? Absolute rock stars. Forget Coachella or Glastonbury. These were the original headliners. In their communities, storytellers wielded the same sort of influence as today's top influencers, but with more substance and less product placement. They were the living archives, the Wikipedia, and the spiritual guides all rolled into one. They didn't just narrate tales, they embodied them, ensuring each word resonated with the wisdom handed down through countless generations. Their performances weren't just about entertainment, they were a communal experience, a shared understanding of the past, present, and future. Economically, these oral traditions were invaluable. Think about it, no need to spend a dime on books, schools, or libraries. All you needed was a good storyteller. This was knowledge transfer at its most cost-effective. But more than that, it was a way to ensure that every member of the community had access to the same information, leveling the playing field in a way that modern education systems still struggle to achieve. However, let's not get misty-eyed about this romantic notion of an oral utopia. The reality was as tough as it was beautiful. Maintaining this level of precision required a society deeply committed to its cultural practices. The storyteller's role was rigorous, often demanding a lifetime of learning and perfecting the craft. It wasn't just about memorizing words, it was about understanding the essence, the lessons, and the spirit of the stories. The social dynamics surrounding storytelling were fascinating too. It wasn't just a free-for-all where anyone could stand up and start spinning a yarn. There were hierarchies and protocols, with knowledge often restricted by age, gender, or kinship lines. This wasn't elitism, it was a way to ensure the integrity and fidelity of the stories. Think of it as an ancient form of peer review, a way to keep the stories as crisp and flawless as a freshly minted coin. As we move forward, remember that these storytelling mechanics were more than just cultural quirks of a bygone era. They were sophisticated systems that enabled Indigenous Australians to thrive in some of the harshest environments on Earth. It was a testament to human ingenuity, showing that even without the trappings of modern technology, people found profound ways to connect, communicate, and pass down their heritage. In a world where we're constantly bombarded with fleeting information, there's something profoundly grounding about the meticulous care and shared responsibility involved in these oral traditions. It's a reminder that stories are the lifeblood of human experience, binding us to our past and guiding us into the future. As we continue to unravel these narratives, let's appreciate the timeless rhythm of spoken word, a dance of language that has kept communities alive and thriving for millennia. And speaking of stories that refuse to fade, let's dive into the roller coaster of history that shaped these oral traditions. Spoiler alert, it's not all sunshine and songlines. We're talking colonial impact, cultural resilience, and the whole noble savage myth that needs debunking faster than you can say Captain Cook. First, let's zoom in on the seismic shift that was European colonization. When the British arrived in 1788, they thought they'd just found a nice spot to dump their convicts, like, "Hey mate, let's turn this massive land into a penal colony." What could go wrong? Well, a lot actually. They barged in with muskets and measles, blissfully ignorant of the 250 distinct language groups already thriving there. These groups, with their intricate web of stories, were not exactly rolling out the welcome mat for British imperialism. Colonization wasn't just a physical land grab, it was an assault on indigenous culture and identity. The British, in their infinite wisdom, deemed the land terra nullius, or nobody's land, conveniently ignoring the 65,000-year-old residency of Indigenous Australians. Talk about selective vision. This legal fiction justified seizing land without treaty or compensation, leading to widespread displacement and cultural disruption. But here's where things get really interesting. Oral traditions became not just a method of survival, but a form of resistance. Faced with the erasure of their land and culture, Indigenous Australians clung to their stories with renewed vigour. These narratives became a lifeline, a way to preserve identity and solidarity amidst chaos. Think of it as cultural guerrilla warfare. When everything else was stripped away, the stories remained, whispered across generations like a secret code. Now, let's talk about that pesky, noble savage myth. You know, the romanticized image of indigenous people as untouched by the evils of civilization, living in some idyllic harmony with nature. It's a narrative that sells postcards and tourism brochures, but it's about as accurate as claiming koalas make great pets. This myth glosses over the complex and adaptive nature of indigenous cultures. They were not static relics of a bygone era, but dynamic societies with intricate social structures and sophisticated environmental management practices. Take, for instance, the practice of fire stick farming. Indigenous Australians used controlled burns to manage the landscape, promoting plant growth and hunting opportunities. This wasn't some haphazard pyromania. It was a calculated approach to land management that modern science is only just beginning to appreciate. They understood their environment deeply, adapting their practices to the changing seasons and ecosystems. Far from being passive dwellers in paradise, they were active stewards of the land. Economically speaking, the oral traditions were a shrewd investment in human capital. Without written records, these stories ensured vital knowledge was transmitted across generations, empowering communities to thrive in an unforgiving environment. And unlike the British settlers, who were busy importing sheep and smallpox, Indigenous Australians possessed an economic system based on reciprocity and sustainability. Their trade networks spanned vast distances, with goods like ochre and stone tools exchanged over hundreds of kilometres. These were not isolated tribes, but interconnected societies with a keen sense of trade and diplomacy. The resilience of these oral traditions is nothing short of remarkable. Even as Indigenous communities faced the brunt of colonisation, disease, displacement, and the infamous stolen generations policy that saw children forcibly removed from their families, the stories endured. They became a cultural anchor, preserving history, language, and identity in the face of relentless adversity. But let's not sugarcoat it. The survival of these traditions wasn't some miraculous feat of endurance. It was a testament to the strategic adaptability of Indigenous Australians. They absorbed and adapted elements of European culture, using new tools and technologies to reinforce their narratives. This wasn't assimilation, it was a savvy cultural remix, blending the old with the new to ensure continuity. As for the noble savage trope, it's high time we laid it to rest. Indigenous Australians were and are far more than the simplistic caricatures painted by colonial narratives. They were innovators, diplomats, and environmental scientists long before these terms became fashionable. Their oral traditions are not relics of a lost world, but living, evolving testaments to human ingenuity and resilience. So, as we continue to explore these narratives, remember that they are more than just quaint tales from the past. They are a powerful reminder of the enduring human spirit, a testament to the strength of cultural identity in the face of overwhelming odds. And as we unpack these stories, let's do so with the respect and understanding they deserve, acknowledging the depth and dynamism of the cultures that created them. As we wrap this chapter, let's keep the narrative open, much like those ancient stories, always ready for the next turn. These oral traditions are not just echoes from a distant past. They are vibrant, living connections to the land and the people who have called it home for tens of thousands of years. And as the world changes, these stories continue to speak, reminding us of the power of resilience and the enduring strength of cultural identity. So, as these oral traditions continue to whisper their wisdom across millennia, let's fast forward to today, where the ancient meets the digital age in the most unexpected of places. Picture this. The traditional campfire has been replaced by the flicker of computer screens and the glow of smartphones as digital platforms become the new stage for Indigenous storytelling. It's like swapping your old transistor radio for Spotify. The medium might have changed, but the music, or in this case the stories, remain timeless. Enter the modern world, where Indigenous Australians are not just passive spectators to globalisation, but active participants, remixing and reimagining their age-old traditions for a contemporary audience. Let's talk about the new storytellers, those who are turning Instagram reels and TikTok videos into the campfires of the 21st century. They're using humour, satire, and sometimes a healthy dose of sarcasm to keep these stories alive and kicking. Take, for example, the work of comedian and writer Stephen Oliver, whose razor-sharp wit cuts through the noise of modern media like a hot knife through butter. His sketches and performances often tackle serious issues like racism and cultural identity, but they do so with a humour that's as biting as it is enlightening. It's a strategy that echoes the traditional trickster tales, using laughter to reveal deeper truths and challenge societal norms. And then there's the rise of Indigenous filmmakers and content creators who are putting their spin on traditional narratives. They're blending Dreamtime stories with modern genres, creating films and series that capture both the spirit of the past and the realities of the present. Think of it as a cultural reboot, like taking a beloved classic and adding a modern twist that resonates with today's audience. But let's not pretend this digital transformation is all smooth sailing. The shift from oral to digital storytelling brings its own set of challenges, not least of which is the risk of cultural appropriation and misrepresentation. In the vast ocean of the internet, where memes and misinformation float freely, there's a delicate balance between sharing cultural stories and protecting them from being distorted or commodified. Despite these challenges, digital platforms offer a unique opportunity for Indigenous Australians to share their stories with a global audience, breaking down the geographical and cultural barriers that once seemed insurmountable. It's like turning up the volume on a story that's been playing in the background for 65,000 years, inviting everyone to listen and learn. This digital storytelling is not just about preserving the past, it's about addressing the pressing issues of the present. Take climate change, for instance. Indigenous Australians have been sounding the alarm about environmental stewardship long before it became the buzzword of choice at international summits. Their stories and practices offer invaluable insights into sustainable living, reminding us that the land is not just a resource to be exploited, but a partner to be respected. In this context, oral traditions become a powerful tool for activism, weaving together past wisdom with present urgency to advocate for environmental and social justice. It's storytelling with a purpose, using the weight of history to push for change in a world that desperately needs it. Meanwhile, urbanisation presents another challenge and opportunity. As more Indigenous Australians move to cities, these stories adapt once again, finding new homes in urban landscapes. It's a testament to their resilience and flexibility, proving that these narratives are not tied to a specific place, but are living, breathing entities that can thrive anywhere. Economically, this adaptation is crucial. By bringing their stories to a wider audience, Indigenous Australians can create new opportunities for cultural tourism and education, providing both economic benefits and a platform for cultural exchange. It's a savvy move that turns storytelling into a vehicle for economic empowerment, ensuring these traditions continue to thrive in a rapidly changing world. Let's not forget the role of humour and satire in this modern storytelling renaissance. In a world where attention spans are shorter than a tweet, these elements are essential for engaging audiences and keeping these stories relevant. It's like adding a dash of spice to a traditional recipe, making it enticing for a contemporary palate while retaining its original flavour. So, as we navigate this digital landscape, let's remember that these stories are more than just relics of the past. They are dynamic, evolving narratives that speak to the heart of human experience. And as Indigenous Australians continue to adapt and innovate, these stories will remain a vital force, connecting us to our shared history and guiding us toward a more inclusive future. In our next part, we'll delve even deeper into this modern storytelling landscape, exploring how these narratives continue to evolve and what they tell us about the future of cultural identity in a globalized world. But for now, let's leave the campfire burning, a beacon of resilience and creativity in a world that's constantly changing. And here we are, standing at the crossroads between ancient wisdom and the relentless march of modernity. It's a curious place, really, where the past and future collide like an awkward dance-off at a family wedding. But instead of outdated dance moves, we're talking about timeless stories that have survived the ages and still have plenty to teach us, if we're willing to listen. Let's start by unpacking a lesson modern society desperately needs: community cohesion. In a world where scrolling through social media often feels more isolating than engaging, the oral traditions of Indigenous Australia offer a masterclass in fostering genuine connections. These stories were not just entertainment, they were the glue that held communities together. They taught people how to live in harmony, resolve conflicts, and support one another. In today's fragmented world, where the average person changes jobs every 4 years and moves house every 11.7 years, These lessons in stability and unity are golden nuggets of wisdom. Take a page from the Indigenous playbook on sustainable living. Long before sustainability became a buzzword or an Instagram hashtag, Indigenous Australians practiced a way of life that was all about balance with nature. Their land management techniques, like fire stick farming, weren't just about survival. They were a commitment to ensuring the land thrived for future generations. Contrast that with our current ecological crisis, where we're tiptoeing along the edge of environmental disaster faster than you can say carbon footprint. It's a stark reminder that maybe the answers aren't in the next big tech breakthrough, but in looking back at practices that have stood the test of time. Of course, we can't talk about these traditions without addressing the ongoing struggle for recognition and rights. The fight for land rights and cultural preservation is as much a part of the story as the tales themselves. Remember the Mabo case of 1992? This landmark decision finally acknowledged the native title rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, overturning the terra nullius myth and recognizing their long-standing connection to the land. It was a victory, sure, but also a reminder of the long road still ahead. Despite these advances, Indigenous Australians continue to battle for equality, justice, and the right to tell their own stories without distortion or dilution. And here lies the crux: storytelling as a form of cultural preservation. These narratives aren't just about the past, they're a living, breathing testament to identity and resilience. They hold the power to educate, enlighten, and inspire change. In a world where information is consumed like fast food, these stories offer a gourmet feast of knowledge, reminding us that history is not just a series of dates and events, but a tapestry of human experience. Let's not romanticize it too much, though. The romantic notion of storytelling as a panacea for all societal woes is tempting, but it's crucial to recognize the harsh realities. The preservation of these stories requires effort, respect, and a willingness to engage with uncomfortable truths. It's not always easy, but then again, the most valuable lessons rarely are. Yet, as we wrap up this exploration, it's these very stories that continue to weave a narrative of hope and resilience. They're a reminder that while the world may change, the fundamental truths of human nature, our need for connection, our responsibility to the land, and our capacity for storytelling remain constant. It's a legacy that challenges us to look beyond the surface, to dig deeper, and to appreciate the richness of the human experience. In the end, these oral traditions teach us that the real power lies not in the stories themselves, but in our willingness to listen. They invite us to pause, to reflect, and to understand that sometimes the most profound lessons come not from what's new and shiny, but from what's ancient and enduring. So, as we continue to hurtle toward the future, let's carry these stories with us, one yarn at a time, as reminders of where we've been and guides for where we're going. Because in a world obsessed with the next big thing, perhaps the greatest breakthrough is simply listening to the wisdom that's been with us all along.